College football has changed a lot in a few years, but what if we let conferences be determined by promotion and relegation? I have created a three-tier system with the SEC and the Big Ten as the premier conferences, the ACC and the Big 12 directly below them in Tier 2, and then the smallest 6 conferences, the G6 and Tier 3, giving their teams a chance to climb all the way to the top if they can. Every season, 6 teams from each tier will either move up or down the pyramid. So let's just say Kentucky finishes at the bottom of the SEC, which they unfortunately did in Season 1. They will be dropping into the ACC alongside Auburn and South Carolina. Meanwhile, as a Tier 2 conference, the ACC gets to send up 3 teams, so Miami, Duke, and Pittsburgh will all be joining the SEC. This is where things get real problematic for some of these bigger programs, though, because the ACC also has to relegate 3 of their teams down to the G6 conferences, which is California, Virginia Tech, and Boston College. If we take another look at how I set this system up, the only Tier 3 teams that can join either the ACC or the Big 12 will be conference champions. So for these programs, conference championship week is all that matters. Of course, there will still be one playoff spot available to a Tier 3 program, but for their long-term success, being able to move up the ladder to a better conference will help them much more in the future, and there are a ton of great matchups that we could choose from. Now, what I'll be doing in this video is taking this experiment 20 seasons into the future, with the ultimate hope of seeing a Tier 3 program climb up to the SEC or the Big 10 and win the conference. And I want to thank EA Sports for sponsoring this video. This is just one of the many cool things that you can do inside Dynasty Mode. We'll follow a couple journeys and stories throughout this year, this one being North Texas and Memphis playing for a spot in the ACC. But before we can see who wins that game for promotion, we have to check out some of the other stuff that happened in the country. What I already mentioned in the intro is out of the SEC, the 3 teams dropping down. While the ACC sent these 3 up, I also put Notre Dame in a conference just to balance out the numbers. But out of the other Tier 1 conference, the Big 10, you're going to see they have 5 potential teams that could be in the college football playoff, and they're sending down Nebraska, Maryland, and Minnesota to the Big 12. If those teams happen to struggle in this Tier 2 conference next year, they could fall to the group of 6 conferences at the very bottom of the pyramid. BYU, Texas Tech, I don't think that's a surprise that they're moving up to the Big 10 next season, but Baylor being unranked is. Then you have Oklahoma State, West Virginia, UCF, all falling down to whatever group of 6 conference makes the most sense geographically. And outside of the conference championship games deciding what teams are promoted to the Tier 2 conferences, this is all the movement that's going to be happening headed into Season 2. I want to make sure that everybody's team at least gets a little bit of recognition so you can follow your program throughout this 20-year journey. Byron Brown is set up to win the Heisman Trophy, by the way. But even with the season that he had, you can see that USF is finishing 5th in the American, so they're staying a Tier 3 program, though they were in a 4-way tiebreaker that Memphis just came out on top of. For some of these other group of 6 conferences, they'll be much more entertaining to pay attention to once we see some big programs drop down and try to escape them. The MAC's actually got a couple of top 25 teams. And then I've rearranged the Mountain West Conference and the Pac-12 to reflect what it's going to look like next season. I figured that was the best way to do it. They're balanced out both with 9 teams. I threw UConn in here just to get that total up to 9. And lastly, we have the Sun Belt. James Madison won the conference in real life. They're trying to get promoted to the ACC, but to do so, they're going to have to take down Arkansas State. Again, this conference championship week is so crucial for all of the G6 conferences. It's how they can start their trajectory upward, which is why I wanted to see North Texas and Memphis play. Both of these teams are starting to invest more money into their football programs so they can eventually make this jump in real life. And we have a promotion game that is already going to be a classic. North Texas currently trailing by 6. Drew Mestemaker trying to make something happen here. He's just going to get this ball out last second, and they're going to be at the 29. North Texas was still fortunate to have a couple timeouts saved up. I think what's most interesting about this is he's transferring to Oklahoma State in real life. Oklahoma State in the system is dropping down to Tier 3, where North Texas could move up to a Tier 2 conference with a win here. He hesitates a little bit. He almost throws a pick, but it's going to be a touchdown instead. North Texas taking care of business at home. Though you have to wonder, did this touchdown come a little bit too soon? Memphis has 27 seconds left on the clock to get a field goal. Something could always go bad with the extra point too, but it's not very likely. They drill it. Let's see what the Tigers are able to do. Things could be worse for them. They still have 2 timeouts left, and that is a huge start. They are now at the 42-yard line. Brendan Lewis, quick little check down isn't helping. But both of these quarterbacks have been excellent in this game. Neither one has thrown an interception. I thought he was about to find somebody. It would have been a wild crossbody throw. Looks like they got 4 receivers set out on that right side, but he takes a sack. And with no timeouts left, North Texas is going to pick up the win, winning the American Conference more important than ever because they've just earned themselves promotion. The Mean Green will be headed to the ACC Conference next year alongside James Madison and Hawaii. This is the Atlantic Coast Conference, now adding Hawaii as well. Meanwhile, for the other Tier 3 programs, you have Jacksonville State, you have Miami, Ohio, and you have Boise State all joining the Big 12. 12. I know this has been a lot to take in, which is why I'm hoping this table that I built can help summarize things a little bit better for some of you. And we still have some more things to talk about going on in Season 1. Fernando Mendoza just won the Heisman Trophy. I don't know what the odds are that this happens in real life and in the game, but he did while USC took the Big Ten championship. BYU beats Texas Tech twice this season. It went the other way in real life. This is what the top 12 is looking like. North Texas gets that last automatic spot. They jumped over one of the MAC schools, and you'll see what happened in the playoffs in a second. But first, we got to talk about some of the passing leaders in the country. Are Drew Mestamaker and Micah Alejado staying at their schools since they just won the conference and they're moving up to a Tier 2 conference? They're very young quarterbacks. Ideally, they're going to stay at their school. Seth McGowan, by the way, he had the 5th most rushing yards in the country, and Kentucky still didn't win a single SEC game. The leading rusher was Navy's fullback. And I've started to figure out why Hawaii had so much success in the new Mountain West Conference, because they had a guy like Jackson Harris at receiver too. Now, I will say, I want to watch every single national championship, but I got way too excited to see how all of this is playing out in the future that I skipped over Texas Tech taking down Michigan. This is how the bracket shaped out. And that is a Texas Tech team that's 2 losses, both came to BYU. Both of these schools moving up to the Big Ten Conference next season alongside Baylor. And it looks like the transfer portal is still hitting schools like North Texas pretty hard because their freshman running back, Caleb Hawkins, has decided he'd rather go somewhere else. He had over 1,000 rushing yards and 23 rushing touchdowns last season. He is signed with North Carolina. We will see how that affects them. CJ Carr's another big mover from Notre Dame to Michigan. And look at Dabo Swinney getting effective in the portal, nabbing Alonzo Barnett III from James Madison. That was not the only place that he was effective either. He's decided to start using the portal because he's picked up Ahmad Hardy and Isaac Brown, both going to Clemson. I think they're going to bounce back next season. Juan Lacey decided to sign with Tulane after being at Ole Miss. I guess he wants to try and win the Heisman Rush for 2,000 yards next season. Looks like Louisville got Parrish. Marcel Reed's going to LSU. Ty Simpson to Tennessee. Cam Coleman staying at Auburn. And the last couple transfers we'll mention, Devin Dampier headed to Texas from Utah. We got Noah Fafita headed to Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati quarterback Brendan Sorsby playing for the Crimson Tide. When it comes to who's signing the top classes, I'm not seeing anything at the top that's going to surprise me too much. What I'm more interested in following is those smaller schools that move up, going from a Tier 3 conference to a Tier 2. Maybe they make it to a Tier 1. Do they sign a better class because of it? I have a feeling they should. You got a school like North Texas that just signed the 76th best class. Well, they're about to join the ACC. Then you got a school like Hawaii out in the Mountain West that just signed the 97th best. Are there players in here that could potentially make a difference for them in the future? Maybe. Chase Jenkins transferring in at quarterback, but he's just doing that to be the backup because they were able to retain their redshirt sophomore quarterback. It's very early on to this video, but we've already found a few teams that I am very interested in following. North Texas joining the ACC, and schools like my favorite team, my Kentucky Wildcats, falling down from the SEC to this conference as well. We're also going to find out how a school like West Virginia is able to handle the MAC conference as they have fallen down to a Tier 3 one. And right before we simulate through the season, we just want to look at the preseason top 25, see what those voters predict is going to happen. Duke just moved up to the SEC. They still think that they're going to be able to finish 14th. North Texas is now ranked 20th in the country. And on the Heisman Trophy side of things, all of these names are names that you're still going to recognize. Well, we are another season down, and I can already tell you what conference championship game I am most interested in. Toledo is playing West Virginia for a chance to get promoted. West Virginia is trying to fight their way back up. But to keep it less confusing, so we're not bouncing around to a bunch of different conferences, let's start at the top of the pyramid. Out of the SEC, the 3 teams that are going down, Duke actually performed pretty well considering their expectations. The 3 teams headed down, though, are Missouri, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt. Then in the other top conference, you have schools like UCLA performing really well, while sending down Iowa, Purdue, and Rutgers. And do you know which teams are getting promoted to the top conference? Well, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado all did well in the Big 12, especially Colorado as the only ranked team. Boise State is going to survive here, while Jacksonville State and Miami University are headed straight back down. But I think the funniest part out of all of this is Arizona is headed back to the Pac-12. They're just now one of the bottom conferences. On the other side of Tier 2, Kentucky had an incredible season. Forget about Notre Dame being in a conference for a second. We went undefeated in ACC play. Clemson isn't even able to move up. They're going to be stuck in the ACC for another year. And I got to point out that North Texas was able to go 8-4. South Carolina, a team that fell down, they're also about mid-table. Hawaii has survived going down, and so is James Madison, because NC State, Stanford, and Virginia are all getting sent. That is huge for those teams. The longer they're able to avoid relegation, staying in a Tier 2 conference, the better chance they have of establishing themselves and eventually moving up even further. While some previous Power 4 teams are struggling to even get back up to that tier, you can see Virginia Tech Tech's in the conference championship in the American. They just fell down, so that is enough for success for them. UCF also in the conference championship against Sam Houston. Out of the MAC conference, we already talked about West Virginia and Toledo. Toledo lost the conference championship to Miami, Ohio last year, so they didn't get to move up. And then you have Cal playing UNLV. It's almost like all the teams that fell down from Tier 2 are very quickly trying to move right back up. The longer they stay here, the harder it's going to be to escape. Oklahoma State out of the Pac-12. And then in the Sun Belt, even Boston College was able to find success. So all of these conference championship games are huge. In fact, I said that we were going to see what West Virginia can do. We got to see if Toledo can actually make up for losing the conference championship last year. But there are so many of these matchups that I would be interested in watching the result of. All of these programs are just desperately trying to avoid staying in the bottom tier. And on paper, Toledo actually has a better roster. The drop has not been kind to the Mountaineers. In fact, it was so unkind that they had nothing to play for in this game. Their offense looked horrendous. This punt has been the best thing that they've been able to do all day, losing 37-3. And the Rockets might not have won the MAC conference last year, but they're moving on up while Miami, Ohio is falling straight back down. As for who will be joining them in the Big 12, you have UCF beating Sam Houston, so they're straight back up to the conference. And then you also have the Pac-12 champion, which is going to be Oklahoma State taking down Colorado State. It should also be noted that Cal lost the Mountain West Conference Championship. Tulane wasn't able to beat Virginia Tech in the American Conference Championship, and Boston College beat App State. So for every one of these teams that fell down to Tier 3 last year, outside of West Virginia, they've all been able to earn their promotion straight back up. For all we know, though, they could be falling straight back down again next year. We'll just have to see how that plays out. John Mateer won the Heisman Trophy with 27 touchdowns. And the only reason I understand it a little bit is he did get Oklahoma into the playoff. California is taking that 5th conference champion spot, though. This could be bad for some of the smaller schools and getting back here. It will give them a better edge in recruiting, though. J.J. Colt with an incredible season out of Iowa State. You had Josh Hoover transferring to USC. He did well. Julian Lewis staying at Colorado. That's why they were dominant. Though I can't say Lacey made the smartest decision in transferring to Tulane because he only had 5 rushing touchdowns. They couldn't even win their conference championship game over Virginia Tech. It looks like Washington State had the best running back. And I am understanding why Julian Lewis was as good as he was, because Draylon Miller was a beast. Most receiving touchdowns in the country. As for the college football playoff, I have done it again. I don't know why. It's just a habit. Whenever I miss the playoff and rebuilds, I sim straight past the national championship game. I need to sim to it so we can actually watch it. Notre Dame beat USC. And so for the second season in a row, a team out of a Tier 2 conference has been able to win the national championship. They've not come from the SEC or the Big Ten. A couple other results I find pretty interesting is a school like SMU, who's moving up to the SEC next year, losing to California, who was playing in the Mountain West. And this is another thing that is going to turn into very important stuff throughout this 20 years. You got guys like Jeff Brom leaving to coach for Michigan from Louisville, so they're going to take a hit. Josh Heupel just went to Alabama. Toledo's head coach has decided he'd rather coach for Wisconsin. And then you have names like Kenny Dillingham going to Florida State. You have Dabo Swinney, who got hired as Alabama's coach last year, getting fired, and then taking a job with Auburn, trying to get his revenge there. Mike Norvell to Georgia Tech. John Bordeaux, about as close of my last name as you can get to it. He's coaching for Iowa from LSU. He was their OC. It is Boudreaux. Hawaii's head coach is headed to Arizona State because they lost Kenny Dillingham. That's going to affect the Rainbow Warriors. And that's why I'm not surprised that when it came to their recruiting class, they only went from 97th to 91st in the country. North Texas went up to 51st. They were down at like 77 the year before. Dabo Swinney at Auburn, though, already making a difference, getting them the top 11 class. And Toledo was actually out recruiting West Virginia in the MAC conference, but for most of these conferences, schools like California that fell down, schools like Oklahoma State, even schools like Boston College, they all signed the top class after falling to that 3rd tier. For the big names in the portal, you have Marcel Reed, who just transferred to LSU, now headed over to Georgia. LSU lost their head coach. Julian Lewis has also decided to sign for Texas. He is not staying at Colorado for another season. Michigan losing both of their quarterbacks. And I guess Deuce Knight doesn't want to play for Dabo Swinney at Auburn. All of these transfer decisions are wild to me. Bo Jackson decides he wants to go to Texas too, so Texas is loading up. But you know who else is loading up? Tulane. They were able to sign 4-star quarterback Trevor Tubbs from LSU. And that's not the only player that they took away from the Tigers. They were able to sign the 6th best running back, Harlem Berry. So they are really trying to escape the American. As time goes on, I think all the talent is only going to stay more concentrated at the top of college football than ever before, because if we just look through the top 15 teams in the country, every single one of them is either in the SEC or the Big Ten. And in fact, there's only a few schools from the ACC in Tier 2 in the top 25. You only have one team from the Big 12 currently ranked in the top 25. That's going to be Boise State. But all that means for those teams is they're going to play some very difficult schedules. Looks like Oregon's got a couple kids that could win the Heisman. Marcel Reed at Georgia, maybe. We'll just see how it all works out. I can't speak yet on whether or not Marcel is going to win the Heisman because I haven't seen his stats, but Georgia did finish 10-2. The SEC ACC, extremely competitive. Pittsburgh mid-table, though, at 5-7 because they're just beating up on each other. Bama at 5-7 too. Duke 5-7. They are staying afloat, while SMU, Kentucky, Mississippi State all headed to the ACC. And the ACC still has talented teams to send up to this conference as well. Florida State's moving up. Clemson finally making that jump. Syracuse is as well. It's not going to be Auburn, even though they're number 10 in the country. You'll also notice North Texas, Hawaii, both finishing 6-6, making it to a bowl. So they're establishing themselves more and more, while James Madison went 3-9, falling down with Louisville and Virginia Tech. And for the conferences they'll be headed to, well, the Hokies are going to the American, where their in-state rivals Virginia did not succeed after getting relegated here. Tulane had an incredible year. They still have to win a conference championship to get promoted to Tier 2, though. Then in the Mountain West Conference, Stanford, after going down, did not win out on this three-way tiebreaker, so they're not in the conference championship. While finally, over in the Sun Belt, Louisiana and NC State both went undefeated in conference play. They're playing for the first time in that big game. On the other side of the pyramid, in Tier 1, the Big Ten continues to get better and better. Utah is going to give them their 5th team ranked inside the top 8, so that was a nice add for them. Looks like Texas Tech, Colorado had pretty mid-seasons. Arizona State just going to stay up, while BYU, Northwestern, Wisconsin all headed down. And as a replacement for them, it'll be Minnesota, Nebraska, and Kansas State. Right now, the Big 12 just feels like the most random combination of teams ever. Boise State went 3-9, but they still won 3 conference games while going 3-9, so they're not going to have to head back down to a Tier 3 conference like Toledo, Houston, and Purdue are. We're once again seeing a lot of movement from former Power 4 teams having to fall down to Tier 3 for them this year. We don't know who's moving up from these other conferences until we see Conference Championship Week, but what we do know is Purdue will be in Conference USA next year as the only Power 4 team. None of the other ones have fallen down and stayed down here yet. While in the MAC, where Toledo was able to win this last year, they're falling back next year. West Virginia still has not been able to escape. Akron and UMass, the most random combination of teams ever, have a chance to get into a Tier 2 conference. I never thought I'd be saying their names in this video. Houston will be falling down to the Pac-12. This is the final Tier 3 conference, and you'll see that San Diego State, Colorado State made the conference championship. Arizona struggled here, and we've reached that point where one of these conference championship games has the most on the line, and I think we have to watch both Louisiana, NC State, and Memphis, Tulane, because both of those are big. We already know that Memphis has been here before, and Tulane has been recruiting really well. They just want to get their shot at a bigger conference. But are they going to be able to actually take care of business and win this game? They've already gone undefeated up to this point. It looks like things are going to work out for them, but they need to stop Memphis on this 4th and 4. They can't do it. So this game is not over yet. Once again, Memphis drops back to throw, but he couldn't get that ball out in time, and they're deciding to kick. Now, the funniest part about that is not the fact that they were just passive. They still had their 3 timeouts and the 2-minute timeout. They could have been able to get a stop, get the ball back. What a catch by Tulane, by the way. You might notice, though, they didn't go for an onside kick. You wonder why? That is because their kicker, Max Kelly, couldn't put in a 28-yard field goal. It was hard to tell from that angle, but he did miss it. And so Tulane just ran out the rest of the clock and is going to take their 13-0 season. Then we have this game between Louisiana and NC State. Both of them have not lost a game in Sunbelt play. And I am so glad the EA stayed on top of adding in some of the newer jerseys, because I hadn't seen these ones out of NC State, but with the signature NC State on the front of them, they're sick. They had the home field advantage here, but they are currently trailing by 3 points. So CJ Bailey better be putting together a driver. Louisiana is going to get promoted instead of them. They're going to be at midfield already. And they spiked the ball before that last play. They're going to do it again. With no timeouts left, they're watching the clock extremely closely. Louisiana trying to get in some pass rush, and they do. Chase Edwards with the sack. Clock down to about 30 seconds left in this game. Louisiana sends 4. Their coverage gave him open. There was a spot for that ball to fit in, but CJ Bailey just overthrew him. So it is 4th and 14. Game on the line, and there's just no way that they're going to make it to the marker. Louisiana takes a knee, and they have won the Sun Belt, while NC State's going to have to stay down in a Tier 3 conference for another year. Looking around at some of the other conference championship results, Missouri State is getting promoted after beating FIU. They just became an FBS team a few years ago. San Diego State couldn't beat Colorado State. San Jose State couldn't beat Stanford, so I guess Stanford did get in. I always thought that this order in the conference standings showed that the top 2 teams would be in the conference championship game, but it turns out that's not the case, so I got to watch for that more closely. And for the last promotion game result, I took over Akron just to view stats throughout this video because I never thought they'd make it to this point, but they did, where UMass is headed on to Tier 2. And for Season 3, a lot of these promotions feel wild. Stanford was the only Power 4 team that's headed back up to one of those Tier 2 conferences. You can't deny that things are really starting to change in the college football world. The playoff picture has a team like Syracuse in there, Tulane as a top 3 seed, Louisiana's in as well. well. And even if they're not going to have their Heisman winning quarterback in Dylan Raiola next season, Nebraska is going to be back up in the Big Ten after winning the Big 12, so they've been able to bounce back from getting relegated. All while having a quarterback that had the best touchdown-interception ratio, but he wasn't able to throw for 40 touchdowns like J.J. Cole, who's led the country in passing 2 years in a row. I've also noticed in Caleb Hawkins' third year in college, he is a top 4 rusher in the country, so transferring to North Carolina seemed to be the right decision. He's a 94 overall. He's declaring for the draft. He might be a first-round pick. You also have some other small school running backs near the top. If Old Dominions returns next year, that could be a big deal. Nebraska is going to be getting back the leading receiver in the country. Parker Livingstone ended up at Mississippi State. They've had multiple players that put up some really good stats. And I did not make the same mistake I unfortunately made the first 2 seasons. Again, I apologize for it. We are here to watch the national championship game that Dabo Swinney has been able to get Auburn to. If history continues to track, the past 2 seasons, the national champion has come from a Tier 2 conference, taking down a Tier 1 conference team. But USC has been able to go undefeated all season out of the Big Ten conference. They got Cade Fox at quarterback, who's thrown for almost 5,000 passing yards. They should do well here. But if they lose, you have to imagine how painful that is for Alabama to fire Dabo Swinney and then him go to Auburn, their biggest rival, in year 1 and win them a national championship. Well, that reality looks like it's actually going to come true. The Trojans down by 10 points with 1:45 left. And I love how they just put in all that effort to get out of bounds, but you got to do a lot more. That'll help. Cade Fox started this game off slow, but the offense putting some things together. Other times, they are still not making plays. Quick check down, get out of bounds. It's a great decision, and you'll see Auburn is playing very backed off over on that left side of the field. I figured they'd take advantage of it. But we all know what it's going to come down to. Even if they get into the end zone on this play, which they came very close to doing, they are going to have to get lucky. They are going to need an onside kick. And that would be such a massive choke from the Tigers. They snag the ball out of the air. 1 timeout for USC. So Auburn can take a knee, and for the 3rd year in a row, the national champion's coming out of a Tier 2 conference. I still don't think it's going to be that way forever. We just got to get more years into the future. Looks like Mike Elko is going to leave Texas A&M for Penn State. John Summerall, who is staying at Tulane, at least on this file, is now headed to Alabama. They're also going to lose their defensive coordinator to BYU, so Tulane is getting raided. And I cannot believe what I'm witnessing. Curt Cignetti has left Indiana to coach for Wisconsin. He's like 70. I guess he wanted a different challenge. Even Mike Norvell continues to fall further and further down because Virginia Tech's going to be a Tier 3 team again. And Alabama has not been happy with their head coaches at all. You got Josh Heupel at Tulsa. You got Joey McGuire leaving Texas Tech for Texas A&M. We just witnessed all sorts of movement that's going to continue to shake up college football in the future. As for these recruiting classes, Tulane is a top 20 recruiting class. They recruited better than Alabama. Now they lost their head coach, so that makes a little bit of sense. But so far, of the schools that have moved up to these Tier 2 conferences that want to make that jump to Tier 1, like North Texas barely signed a top 100 class. Hawaii is not even inside the top 50. I think Tulane is the best chance to fly. They just had to get out of the American in the first place, and they finally did. The only 5-star transfer went from Arkansas to Kansas, so they just got a huge tight end. Looks like the best receiver will be headed to USC. And the poor Southern Miss quarterback got a career-ending injury after he entered the portal, so nobody picked him up. Alabama's going to get A.K. Deer, the best running back in the portal. Looks like UNLV's went to Georgia. And at the same time, Hawaii lost their quarterback that's been with them this entire time right before his senior season to Iowa. It looks like Syracuse is picking up some traction, though. They are joining the SEC next year. They just got a quarterback from Ohio State. I always find it interesting to look through some of these signings. Like Tulane keeps getting 4-star quarterbacks from LSU. And they're going to get their chance to prove that they belong in a Tier 2 conference this next season, replacing Virginia Tech. This is what the ACC is going to look like. And they are still the only original Group of 6 team to be projected as a top 25 team. They're supposed to be the 16th best in the country. We'll see if they can live up to that expectation now that you have schools like Clemson and Florida State in the SEC. For the ACC teams that moved up to the SEC, by the way, they perform pretty well in conference play. You see Miami and Clemson both doing really well. Florida State went 7-5. Duke and Pittsburgh and Syracuse, all 3 of those ACC schools are all falling back down. While moving up in their place, you have Missouri, you have SMU, and you have Auburn, who won't even get a chance to go back-to-back because they're not going to be able to make it to the playoff. I also want to note how close North Texas just came to getting up to the SEC. They're now 14th in the country. Maybe they'll do better in conference play next year. Kentucky at 7-5. And for poor Louisiana, Georgia Tech, and Hawaii, who went 1-11 because they lost their starting quarterback, well, they're going to be relegated. Tulane went 5-7 too, so it's not like they handled their promotion very well. well. Indiana, despite losing Kurt Signetti, still number 6 in the country. Utah trying to compete as best as they can. It's just very tough in a conference like this. Minnesota immediately fallen straight back down alongside Illinois and Kansas State. Sometimes getting relegated, though, is the best thing that can happen to your football program, because when was the last time Rutgers went undefeated? I'm not sure anybody is even alive that could have witnessed it now. It had to have been a long time ago. Iowa and Kansas are also moving up to the Big Ten, while Maryland was just on the outside. I've also been impressed by both UMass and Missouri State to maintain their positioning in this Tier 2 conference, while Colorado State is headed down. Boise State 4-8. BYU as well, 3-9. That is back-to-back relegations. They were just in the Big Ten. I will say, now that we're a few years in, I think things are starting to really balance out pretty well. And there are a lot of teams that are just trying to crawl their way back up to being in that Tier 2, like Arizona. They're in a Pac-12 championship game against Washington State. This could have been a real Pac-12 conference championship game in the past, but everything's messed up now, so it's got to be in this world. And Louisville is in the Mountain West Conference Championship. West Virginia, they're playing Toledo again. Memphis is trying their best to get up. This is the way that they're going to have to do it. NC State is back, and they're playing number 20 Marshall, so we're watching this one. Even with home field advantage last year, the Wolfpack couldn't beat Louisiana, but they got it again. They also have a huge roster advantage, and all that they want to do is get promoted back to the ACC. The longer that they stay down here in the Sun Belt, the harder it's going to be to escape. I will say, with a few minutes left, they're in a prime position. Marshall's not getting in here, so they got their 10-point lead, but are they going to stop Marshall on 3rd and goal? They're about to get a sack. After all of that, too, there was a flag on Marshall, so either way, they were getting backed up a bunch. But that's not going to end the game for the Thundering Herd, who have it within a possession. They're literally just going to kick it off deep to NC State, trust that with their 3 timeouts, they're able to get the ball back with a defensive stop. And this is where Marshall could use a big-time play. You got promotion on the line, but NC State has some playmakers. It is rare to see somebody that explosive, and I think it just caught Marshall off guard. They can still get the ball back, though. 2nd and 9, another RPO. If you give it to 12 again, he is going to pick up the first down. And Teddy Hoffman is going to seal the game for NC State. He's not a Heisman Trophy winner or anything like Cade Fox is. He is trying to get revenge for USC. But he was a difference maker, and looking at teams getting promotion, you have FIU beating Western Kentucky. You have Washington State beating Arizona. Louisville got shredded by Utah. And this is the most surprising one to me. West Virginia wasn't able to beat Toledo. Memphis was also able to get a playoff spot, beating Temple, the second Tier 3 conference team to do it, just because Iowa won the Big 12. And that's what they did after stealing Hawaii's quarterback. The only reason that they are going to be headed back to the Mountain West Conference. It's interesting to look at how some of these standings shaped out. I think I forgot to look at the Tier 3 conferences before we went into conference championship week. It always seems like the same couple of teams are at the top of these conferences while other schools are struggling. I'm glad that FIU is finally getting an opportunity to move up just because we got some history there. We want to see them do well. Look at the Virginia schools not doing well in the American, though. Then nationally, of course, Michael was one of the top quarterbacks for the Hawkeyes. They've not seen quarterback play like this probably forever. Cade Fox, though, look at this season. 45 touchdowns, 5 picks. It's clear how he won the Heisman Trophy. USC's offense was really good. Memphis also had a solid running back. It's why they're going to get their chance at promotion. Rutgers, their guy had 14 touchdowns. But what it's all about, especially for these teams that don't just have loaded rosters year after year, is how are they able to keep bringing in talent? Are they going to be able to maintain what they've been able to do? Missouri State had a top 3 receiver in the country, but now that he's graduated, are they going to get relegated with him off the team? They were able to stay up for a season, but that's only 1 year. We also got a national championship game between Oregon and Clemson. Those teams belong in the SEC and the Big Ten currently. So we might have finally reached the point in the future where if you're not belonging to a Tier 1 conference, you're not going to be able to build up enough talent to make it all the way to this national championship. And we all know that Dabo Swinney is currently with the Auburn Tigers, so it's not him coaching for Clemson. It is Shane Beamer. It's going to be the first championship game that heads to overtime. And Oregon is trying to get there first. They got the ball right now. Can't even get that one out. The Clemson pressure is coming fast. It's coming hard. The run for 6 makes it 3rd and 4. Clemson might send about 5 here. It was hard to tell what they were planning on. It's a run for the Ducks, and they don't have enough. It just wasn't the right play call there. They're going to have to kick a field goal. And the Tigers win a championship with a touchdown. They lost a few games this season, but they had a good enough roster to get to this point, and that should have been game. Oregon had the interception in their hands. That would have ended it all. Instead, 3rd and 2. Michael Van Buren Jr. with the pressure on him, and they just ran an RPO. Was that a fumble? I thought it was for a second, but it was not. So Oregon called a timeout. They're trying to ice the kicker. Can the Tigers clutch up the same way the Ducks did? I mean, that looks good to me. It's just not going to be that simple to crown a national champion, though. One of these teams needs to figure out how to reach the end zone. And Clemson started off solid. They're getting a couple more. But are we going to see any shots to the end zone? We don't need a shot to the end zone when you can just run it. Oregon is not going to make the same mistake of giving it up. They have so many guys ready to stop the run this time, and they did. Just barely, though, from where they first got their hands on him. Easy throws, easy catches. Clemson up by 6. But there is more to second overtime in college football than just that touchdown. You got to get the 2-point conversion, which they do. That's going to put a lot of pressure on Oregon, who hasn't seen that much offensive success in this game. I mean, they're just lucky that they still have the ball after that. It should have been an interception. They're going to throw an interception here. What is number 3 doing? He's selling. And that is going to give Clemson a national championship. Currently, they're at the top of the college football world. Marcus Freeman, though, his time has expired at Notre Dame. He gets fired. He's headed to Florida, while Notre Dame picks up Steve Sarkisian from Texas. And somehow, some way, Lane Kiffin was at Oklahoma. He has now finally ended up at LSU, where he is at in real life. Funny how that all works out. Willie Simmons is going to get hired at Georgia Tech from FIU, so that's going to hurt the Panthers, who just got promotion. Though I would like to point out that Boise State just made an incredible hire with Kyle Whittingham. I think that's going to really help them. I'm not sure where they're currently sitting at, but that's why we track everything on this. I can see that they're headed back to the Pac-12, while Washington State just got promotion through the conference championship week. I'm not sure if I had showed this updated or not. There's just so much I'm interested in tracking at once, like even where some of these players are going in the portal. Notre Dame got the #1 player to return back to their school after he put his name in there. NC State just picked up the #2 corner, though, so they're building up some momentum with their program. They also got the #1 receiver. But do you know who picked up Adrian Smith, the best quarterback in the portal? My Kentucky Wildcats. So maybe they can find their way back into the SEC. Currently, they're just sitting about mid-table in the ACC. And there's one class that I've just been tracking more than anyone else, mainly because I thought Tulane had a really good shot of continuing to move up, but I don't see them anywhere near the top of these recruiting rankings. They're down at 39. North Texas is another one of those smaller schools that has been starting to build momentum. They were so close to getting promotion this past year. Maybe they continue to build off of that. We'll just have to wait and see. I always find it interesting going through this top 25, seeing what conference these schools belong in, and outside of NC State, Maryland, and North Texas, those 3 schools, all of them belong to the SEC or the Big Ten. I know that we've set it up to work this way, but just seeing 22 of the 25 top teams in the country belong to only 2 conferences, which is the Tier 1 conferences, it's still wild. And we might see Michigan State start to emerge again. They currently are ranked #8 in the preseason. Bryce Baker is a 95 overall quarterback. Could this be the season the Spartans finally decide to bounce back? Well, it seems like the Spartans are going to fall about 5 spots short of making it to the college football playoff. This is how the Big Ten shaped out. You have Rutgers falling straight back down after they had an incredible season. Kansas State and Penn State also dropping. All while Oklahoma State has finally found a groove. Illinois headed straight back up, and UMass cannot be the first team to do this. I'm looking at the tiebreakers right now. It says they are 3rd in the Big 12. You got Iowa State, you got Missouri State, Cincinnati, TCU, all not able to take away this spot. Huge tiebreaker. And they have done it with a 7-5 season. UMass is the first program to ascend from Tier 3 all the way up to Tier 1. I just can't believe that's how it worked out. They're probably going to get shredded in the Big 10 next season, but who cares? If they ascend like that, it's going to help them sign way better classes. UCF, Washington State, Northwestern, all headed down. And it's going to make sense for Washington State to be back in the Pac-12. We could see Boise State earn promotion. Meanwhile, Northwestern is headed to the MAC conference, where Ohio and Western Michigan are in the conference championship. West Virginia could not make it. They have not been able to escape. And then UCF will be in Conference USA that BYU's handled really well after getting relegated. They just can't win their non-conference games. I also want to point out, Purdue went 2-10 in Conference USA. It doesn't get much worse than that. Notre Dame is on top of the SEC. So is Florida State. It's interesting to see what teams are emerging over in this conference that's been very competitive, sending Florida, Ole Miss, and Missouri all down to the ACC. And I guess Pittsburgh's going straight back up, alongside Arkansas earning their spot back. NC State, coming off a promotion, they're going for a 2nd straight promotion. They want to get into the SEC. That makes sense, though. They had some good transfer signings. North Texas, Tulane, they continue to establish themselves here. Even UTEP was able to go 6-6. We got Syracuse, Memphis, and Vanderbilt falling down. And I think I'm going to put Memphis in the Mountain West Conference just to see how they do out here. We already have seen them in the American. That feels like a good landing spot for Syracuse, where 2 ACC teams are going to be in the conference championship game. And then over in the Sun Belt, this is where we're going to stick Vanderbilt. It could be a problem. You got schools like Louisiana, App State, Marshall that have been competing. Even Louisiana Monroe is somehow good, making the conference championship against James Madison. And of all of these matchups, I have to think, what is the highest stakes? Who are some of these teams that we've been watching? Can Louisville finally escape the Mountain West Conference? That's probably the question I'm most curious about at the moment. I'm of course going to be on a hate watch because I'm a Kentucky fan, man, they're struggling even more than my Wildcats have been struggling if they're down in a Tier 3 conference. But headed into this game, they have an 18 overall roster advantage. I don't think it's going to matter too much that they have to play on the road. I was clearly underestimating the Wolfpack, though, because they have a 13-point lead with 23 seconds left. The odds of Louisville winning this game are so low. And it is all quarterback Jake Elliott's fault. He has one interception, and it went for a pick 6, so that sure did not help them out. He has to get rid of it. What he really needs to do right now is just throw it all the way up to the end zone, send the Hail Mary out now, because if you don't get a touchdown immediately, you can't come back. And one thing I love about Nevada Stadium is they have the Wolfpack just roaring or growling, whatever wolves do. Roaring? No, it's howling. It just came to me. They howl. They don't growl. They don't roar. They are howlers. Final play of the game, I guess, is I'm just talking rubbish. That right there is going to do it for the Mountain West Conference Championship. Promotion for Nevada. I'm not sure their fans were thinking that would come in this video, but they've been able to maintain their head coach this entire time while Louisville's gone through multiple. It's affecting their program. Western Michigan is just going to beat Ohio by 1 point to get promotion. Boise State takes down Fresno State. And BYU loses to Jacksonville State? I thought for sure the Cougars were going straight back up. James Madison's going to get promoted for the second time. You also have Georgia Tech beating Virginia Tech. And what that leaves us with is another season where a majority of the conference champions out of the Tier 3 conferences have been Group of 6 schools. They outnumber the Power 4 schools there by quite a few, but I still find it surprising. They're at a major spending disadvantage, and when you have a player like DeMarco playing in the American, playing in a Tier 3 conference, how are some of these smaller schools supposed to compete? He's winning the Heisman. Now, you could argue he won the Heisman because he was playing in an easier conference. I won't give you pushback on that. This is what the playoff picture is looking like. A couple of surprises in here, but ultimately it's full of Power 4 programs. What we've been able to take note of is a lot of the time Georgia's just picking up the best transfers no matter what. USC also getting some good guys into their team, and less often the stat leaders around the country are coming from some of the smaller programs. You see Oklahoma State and Illinois have the top 2 running backs. That's why they're in the playoff. But here's a couple sneaky guys for you. You got Eastern Michigan with a beast at receiver. Same thing for Marshall, 2 of the top 3 receivers from those Tier 3 conferences. Even FIU's got some dogs. But if any of those teams are ever going to make a run in this video, they're going to have to put together talent at every single position. For this Florida State and Notre Dame national championship matchup, both of them are coming out of the SEC. And there were some teams in the playoff like Pitt who were in the ACC this season, so they weren't in a Tier 1 conference. They still made their good run. But it's not going to be enough to get them to this game, and this is coming immediately after Steve Sarkisian decided he wanted to leave Texas and coach for the Fighting Irish. He could get them a championship right now. It's also nice to see Florida State back to having some success. Kenny Dillingham doing his best here. His team currently trails by 6, but they aren't out of this one. They just have to drive down the field, score a touchdown for the win. It's asking a little bit, but they got 2 minutes on the clock. They have time to get it done. You just got to go about 85 yards total down the field. So far, Kevin Sperry has had a solid game. Nothing amazing, but he doesn't have a pick. He's just played it safe a little too often like he did on that last play, getting this one out quick. And that was the right move. It makes it a 3rd manageable. Notre Dame bring in 4. He has all the time in the world to just throw this one up. It is caught. And the confidence you got to have in your guy to just give him a jump ball in that situation is pretty high. I wouldn't be surprised if he looked back in his direction again. It's not going to be another, though. There is a flag. Now, it's against Florida State, so it's not going to change the turnover. It is very rare to see a pass interference against the offense in this game, but we just did, and they can run out the clock. That's how the Fighting Irish are going to win this national championship. All while Texas was a quarterfinal exit to Pittsburgh after just surviving Oklahoma State. As for some of these staff moves, Nebraska's picking up Mike Bobo after they decide to fire Jed Fish. He's going over to Texas Tech. And this might actually be the most underwhelming coaching carousel that we have seen so far. Kurt Signetti's just going to retire at Wisconsin. I don't think he really did anything while he was there, and we are now 5 seasons into this 20-year experiment. We haven't seen any small schools do anything too special yet. But do not forget, UMass is headed up to the Big Ten next season. If they could just survive there for a year, I think their recruiting class would see a really big jump. Currently, it's 78th in the country, but they have room to grow for all of the top classes. Are we going to see Tulane up here? No, we are not, but NC State inside the top 25 again. Kentucky, I just want to see them do something. And I've taken note that North Texas is signing about top 50 classes every year. Memphis headed back down, so their class doesn't matter. Tulane, number 82. But then again, sometimes you just got to look at the players that they're signing. They didn't need that many players to fill their needs for this next season, and a lot of these guys are still talented. The ranking isn't everything. Even Oklahoma State, after having a good season, just signed the best cornerback in the country from Oklahoma. I can't believe they were able to flip him like that. And when it comes to quarterbacks, the number 1 transfer, Joseph Jewell, is going to leave Michigan to head to Arizona State. Heading heading into season 6, Notre Dame is going to be the favorite to win the national championship. Pittsburgh is up there at number 3, and out of the ACC, you have Duke, you have Georgia Tech, and you have North Texas ranked. The only ranked team from the Big 12 conference is Iowa State. And then you got the rest of them coming from Tier 1. Looking at these projected Heisman Trophy winners, though, Stephen Weed out of Utah might be why they've had some success. Same thing, this running back from NC State, Adrian Smith, lead Kentucky to glory, please. I have a kind of positive update on how Kentucky did, but before we can get to that, you have to notice something. Texas is 11-1, while Notre Dame, after winning the national championship, they went 6-6. Falling back down to the ACC, NC State barely survived here. Florida State, Pittsburgh, SMU headed down. And this is where we get to Kentucky. They are tied in a 4-way tie. No, it's a 5-way tie, but Mississippi State and Georgia Tech are both headed up alongside Tulane, who's the number 3 team in the country. So unfortunately, my Wildcats are going to fall a little bit short. Headed down, though, to the Tier 3 conferences, Nevada doesn't surprise me too much, Boston College and Stanford. And Stanford will be falling to the American, where Temple's got a chance to win the conference. They've already won all their conference games this season, but Syracuse is in the way. Then we're going to stick Nevada back in the Mountain West. It seems like Louisville has just missed out on the conference championship. And for Boston College, well, they're going to be headed to the Sun Belt. Marshall's got another opportunity for promotion, so does Troy. And over in the Big Ten, Ohio State seems to be the team to beat this season. They're undefeated. All of these other schools went 9-3. That is a lot of 9-3 in a row. For teams headed back down, though, UMass was not able to survive. Neither was Baylor or Washington. But I have to give some praise to Oklahoma State for a second. They started off this video in one of the early seasons, falling to a Tier 3 conference. They've now bounced back with promotions, and they've finished 6th in the country. And for Penn State, this is just going to be really sad. TCU, Wisconsin, and Maryland are all right above them, even though they have the same conference record. They don't have the tiebreaker, so they're going to have to stay in the Big 12. Though it might be for the best, because Missouri State, FIU, Toledo, Jacksonville State, all just avoided relegation, while Cincinnati, Western Michigan, and Kansas are actually headed down. Cincinnati will be headed to Conference USA, where either Purdue or UCF is about to escape. BYU, though, they lost 4 conference games. And for Western Michigan, it just makes sense to be back in the MAC conference. There is no way West Virginia doesn't escape for another season. Kansas will head to the Pac-12, where we have San Diego State, Washington State in the conference championship. Arizona struggling here. Houston really struggling. And across college football, all of those moves, the biggest one is clearly going to be Tulane getting their opportunity to play in the SEC again next season. They were actually one of the founding members of the SEC. If you didn't know, now you do. For all of these conference championship games, though, what one are we going to decide on? I think Temple is a really interesting story. They could beat Syracuse. That's a big game for promotion. I also am very curious, though, is West Virginia actually going to be able to get out? They have been fighting year after year, and they have just come up short so many different times. Ultimately, though, I think this game between Syracuse and Temple is just a bigger deal because the Orange have really fallen off the past couple seasons. And yet they still have an opportunity to get right back up into a decent spot. They just have to be able to take down Temple on the road, who plays in a pretty big stadium. I'm not sure how often they're packing out Lincoln Financial Field. It seats like 68,000 because it's where the Eagles play. But they're in full attendance for this game. And it's made a huge difference. The Orange have only been able to score 3 points. They're throwing up a 50-50 ball that they can't catch. Though I actually really like that attempt. It would have been sick if they brought it in. They're still going to score. And most importantly, the Orange aren't out of it because they saved timeouts. They're going to need this onside kick, though, which is recovered by Temple. And 1 first down will seal it. It would have helped them a bunch to get that, only because Haywood's had a really good game on the ground. I thought they might even try and kick it deep, but he continues to shred them. And he gave the Orange more than they could squeeze, more than they could handle. Temple is getting promotion. But they are not the only school that is. Memphis headed back up. They also got a playoff spot. West Virginia was finally able to win a conference championship by 21. Then we had UCF taking down Purdue. Purdue bounced back, though, because they went like 2-10 within the last couple years. You had San Diego State beating Washington State, and Marshall beating Troy by 21 too. In fact, that was such a big game that it had both of the Heisman Trophy finalists in it, and you might have thought they would give this to Percy Garnes because he had 44 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but it didn't go to him. That is right. The 2030 Heisman Trophy went to Nelson. He stayed his entire career at Marshall, though. This is so respectable. He also had 12 rushing touchdowns with 632 yards, and he won the head-to-head, so I'm fine with him getting it. Temple picking up that win, by the way, put them in the playoff. Though I still think the most shocking news of the entire season is the fact that West Virginia finally escaped the MAC. I think it's been like 5 seasons since they fell down there. The leading passer in the country went to San Diego State. That is why they were able to win the Pac-12 Conference Championship. And Joseph Jewell, the #1 transfer from the portal last year, he still found a lot of success at Arizona State. He's only a sophomore. As for Temple, what did I tell you about Damian Haywood? He was a top 3 rusher in the country. I'm not surprised that they were able able to win the American Conference. He didn't have 20 rushing touchdowns like this UCLA running back, though. And this is why you want to maintain those great receivers. We've seen Marshall's receivers. We've seen Missouri State's receivers continue to be near the top of the country every single season. Those playmakers are the reason those G6 teams have been able to have success. We also saw Memphis make a run all the way to the semifinal, but they could not take down Oregon, so the national championship is between the Ducks and USC. And Dan Lanning's already lost one national championship in this video. He's trying to avoid his second. A win's not going to come easy for the Ducks, though, due to the teams that Lincoln Riley's been throwing together. And we could see Oregon in another overtime championship, or they could end up short of that. It'll all depend what happens on 4th and 5. Their quarterback, Earl Wood, has thrown for 88 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, could not have had a worse game. The fact that they are still in it is a miracle in itself, and he's just chucking it deep into double coverage. What are you doing? After a performance like that, there might need to be some investigations going on. Lincoln Riley, due to that, is going to win the national championship. And I can't believe what I'm seeing right now. Dabo Swinney decided to leave his job at Auburn, where he was having success, and go back to Clemson. He clearly just wanted to return home. For Memphis, though, losing their head coach, same thing for Marshall, is not good. Right after you win promotion, you don't want to have to be making a switch like that one. Kentucky just had Kalen DeBoer. I can't believe I didn't notice this. Now he's headed to Tennessee. You got Matt Rule from Rutgers going over to Washington now. Shane Beamer got fired. He won a national championship just a few seasons ago, and that's some of the major moves in this portal. As for the top classes in the country, again, there's not too many changes up here, but Kentucky signed in the number 16 class. We will take that full-heartedly. NC State continuing to compete. I feel like they're going to make a run at some point. West Virginia signing a top 25 class out of the MAC conference is just nuts. They finally had their breakthrough, though. Tulane is coming in at number 39. I'm not sure if that's going to help them much in the SEC. If you're also wondering what happens in conferences like Conference USA, where you have some of these Power 4 schools fall down, even if their recruiting classes aren't good, they are still so much better than everyone else's. So there's truly no excuse for them to be there that long. Michigan State having the best 2 players leave their team has to be painful, especially when one of them goes to Michigan. All of the talent until this right guard was concentrated in the Big Ten. And if you wanted a smaller school to pick up a great transfer quarterback, that's just not happening here. In fact, North Texas just lost Kevin Leach to LSU, which is going to hurt them a ton. I'm surprised they've been able to stay up as long as they have. But that's just how things go. Right before simming through the season, this is just a little check-in on the top 25. Tulane up to number 11 in the country. I don't think they're going to perform like that. I think they're going to struggle a lot in the SEC. But Kentucky in the ACC at number 14's got me feeling pretty good. Duke is there at number 16. We also have Temple at number 22. Apparently, though, that was drastically underrating the Owls, who are the number 2 team in the country. Yes, you are seeing that right. They are the number 2 team in the country. They beat Florida State, so I'd say that's a pretty solid win. They've won a lot of close ones. The only team that took them down was North Carolina, but they did benefit from having a little bit of an easier conference schedule. Kentucky's still on the outside of the college football playoff, though they did earn promotion, and the teams that they'll be replacing do not include Tulane. It seems like Tennessee, Mississippi State, and NC State are the ones falling down. I thought NC State was building something special. Clearly not. We've also seen UTEP, Marshall, and James Madison all go 1-11. So those were rough seasons for them. Oklahoma State, though, continues to have sustained success at the top of the Big Ten. Near the bottom, we see Arizona State falling down, even though they had one of the better quarterbacks in the country, TCU and Maryland going with them. And as their replacements, Penn State does not surprise me. Neither does Washington or Minnesota. If you just look at the bottom half of this conference, though, it is basically all of the smaller schools that have moved up. You're going to see Iowa State mixed into that group, though, with FIU and Jacksonville State of teams that are getting relegated. And in deciding what Tier 3 conference all of these relegated programs are going to end up at, this is what I've come up with. I think Marshall and the American could make some sense. You got 3 teams in the top 20, by the way, coming out of this conference. East Carolina is going to give Syracuse an absolute battle. We're watching that game. It is for a playoff spot. And another reason Marshall is going to the American is because James Madison has to come back to the Sun Belt. This has been their roots, and they're going to continue to thrive here. As for UTEP, the Miners, they'll be coming back to the Mountain West, where Nevada's had a better season than Louisville. In fact, they were able to take them down head-to-head. That is another interesting conference championship game. Looks like BYU could be able to escape Conference USA as well. It's either them or Purdue. This is where we're just going to place FIU back. And then Jacksonville State can come over to the MAC conference. One of these 2 teams will get promoted, then they'll probably come down sometime soon. Here's the big note, though. Northwestern is at the bottom of the MAC conference. I really don't know if they're going to be able to recover from that moment. The Pac-12 is just becoming what the former Big 12 used to be, because Iowa State's joining it. They already have Houston, Kansas, and Arizona. And I've just been shocked that those teams have not been able to make pushes to get out of the conference when there have been other programs that have had a lot more success with a lot less to work with. This is the big game, though, the one I'm most invested in, because East Carolina has not had a better season than picking up 7 wins this entire time. But somehow they have found themselves in the position to not just get promoted to the ACC, but to also make the playoff. They might just need to hope that most of these players return and they get another chance at it next year, though. Because on defense, Syracuse has been all over the field. You saw that hit right there, breaking up that pass. 3rd and 10, down by 11. East Carolina looking to score fast. And Martin Locke's going to move the chains before spiking the ball. It's very rare in these situations that we actually see a comeback, but on the off chance they get the onside kick, I want to witness it. And they have worked so hard to get to this moment. This is maybe their one chance at promotion this entire 20-year video. So I was thinking they'd be able to capitalize. 4th and 7. This is the game. Once again, they pick it up. That same route has been beating the orange, but it is the only route that has really done them much. They should have stepped up. I don't care how slow Martin Locke is. I think he's able to make it to the end zone. They get this one out. Once again, back of it. Better than throwing it to somebody in double or triple coverage. I could learn something from him. 3rd and goal. He's going to take a sack. And I think you can see why Syracuse is in the position that they currently are. This could be caught. It is going to be caught on his head. Hang on. Pirates are not done yet. They just need about every possible thing to go their way. Starting with this onside kick, it's not going to be a great one. Easy recovery for Syracuse. We have seen way better than that. It was honestly just disappointing. As for some of the other results around the country, you're going to see Temple wasn't able to beat Duke for a second time, but that's not even an important game whenever it comes to promotion. Purdue beating BYU is very crucial for them. It's also crucial for Ohio to take down Central Michigan. And then they've done it again. Louisville just can't even handle Nevada. That was not a close matchup at all. We see Oregon State finally getting an opportunity to get back in a real conference. Troy is going to get demolished by Vanderbilt, and that does not surprise me. While Vanderbilt moves up, James Madison comes down. They'll probably win the Sun Belt next year. But when it comes to this playoff picture, what are we thinking? Who's going to be able to win the national championship? The Heisman Trophy winner was actually Dante Truman from Oregon State. He was able to get them promoted with 44 passing touchdowns, 1 interception, so he's not going to be a part of the college football playoff. And he might not have thrown for anywhere near the most passing yards in the country, but he didn't need to because he completed 67% of his passes and he only had that 1 interception. Look at all these other turnovers from some of these players. Even Kevin Leach, who transferred from North Texas, wasn't that great for LSU, though I would keep an eye on Bob Sharp. He's coming back for his senior season at Washington State. Of course, that's assuming he doesn't transfer. Leading rusher is Kyrie Jones from Ball State. We also got Oscar Butt from Troy putting up a good amount of numbers too. But this is what I want to see. Maybe Hawaii has some success again. They have a freshman running back that's already an 84 overall with 18 rushing touchdowns. I hope I do not see Crumpler in the transfer portal. Also, UConn with some beast. They had a good quarterback, but they've done nothing notable so far in this video. Oregon is back to a 3rd national championship. I just can't imagine that they lose this one too. It gets to a point where eventually one of these games just has to go your way, at least in most teams' cases. For the Ducks though, they've never won a national championship, and if they're going to snag one here, their defense needs to step up, but that is a fast quarterback. When Myron Osawam chose Georgia, he was one of the top quarterbacks in the country in the transfer portal, and he's starting to show why at the most important time. Georgia now inside the red zone, but if they don't do anything with these next couple plays, they're going to have to kick a field goal to tie it. As it becomes 3rd and 9, that is seeming more and more likely. He is just going to get pressured immediately. So Oregon in a position where they could capitalize and win the whole thing. First down from the 17-yard line, though, you had to make a quick read with that type of pressure. And this is the same quarterback that I have flamed in the past. Is Earl Wood going to change my mind about him? Is he going to put on a star performance in the final minute? That throw could have been picked. And we'll see if Dan Lanning's aggressive here, or if he's just going to be passive. Georgia has no timeout, so if they run the football, they could just take this one into OT, but he threw it away. That is not what you want to see. That's not what you want to see at all. You got to be crashing out on the sideline to let that even happen in the first place. But that is something that happens a lot in college football, where I think they should hire someone that's a pro Madden player. Those guys, whenever they're competing in those events, get clock management. Georgia just sends this one deep immediately, and it seems like overtime is still going to happen. They had nowhere to go. Whenever Oregon needed it the most, their defense clutched up there at the end of regulation. They prevented the Bulldogs from getting a touchdown, holding them to a field goal. Then they prevented anything else. But at some point, they're going to find their success. They had their running back open underneath, someone in the end zone too. So here is the response. Earl Wood immediately throws for a first down, and he's going to air it out again, this time for another large gain. Immediately, though, the Ducks are going to have to put together another good drive. And Georgia came out stuffing the run, so I'm not even sure why they went to that. You were having success through the air. Until now. Earlwood stinks. Is this what it feels like watching me play whenever y'all are watching my videos? Not only has the kid cost Oregon one national championship, but he's gonna cost them too. And Georgia has no respect for Oregon, deciding to air it out when all that they need is a field goal to win this one. I guess they're just gonna go for the end zone though. They're getting closer. And with the handoff, the blocks weren't good enough. Now that they're on the hash mark, I have to wonder, are they even gonna hit this kick? They might not, especially after they just got iced. The whole season all comes down to this right here. Is Georgia winning the national championship? That is easily good. And so for the third time in 7 seasons, Oregon comes up 1 game short. At one point, you just got to win one of these. This was the lowest that they were ever seeded headed into the playoff, but they've been pretty unlucky, and this is where the downfall of Temple happens. Even though they've had great back-to-back seasons, they just had TCU snag their head coach, who was Mark Stoops. There's just no way it was him. Another 2 teams that have been having success as G6 schools are going to lose their head coaches to bigger programs to be offensive coordinators. And Lane Kiffin has now bounced around to Notre Dame after being fired by LSU. So there are all sorts of movements going on at the moment. But here's a good pickup for a group of 6 school. Marshall is going to get Matt Campbell, who just got fired from TCU. Also, how was Kalani Sitake coaching for Utah after he was BYU's head coach? Now he stumbled to San Diego State. And even though Louisville hasn't been able to win their conference for years now, they're going to get their head coach poached by NC State, while North Texas loses theirs to Stanford. That was a lot of movement, and it's going to affect some of these recruiting classes. Oregon's still inside the top 10, though. Dan Lanning's been sticking around there, so I think they're eventually going to break through, win that national championship. Oklahoma State signing top classes is probably why they've maintained their success. And even Georgia Tech was able to make a run to the semifinal. I don't want to just skip over that either. The top transfers in the country, one of them being a receiver, Walt Burton, has decided to leave Mississippi State to go over to LSU. We're also going to see another receiver head to Ole Miss from Nebraska. And on the quarterback side of things, Louisville thought that they had someone that was solid for the future, but after losing their head coach, Chong had no choice but to take Michigan over. As for the one school I am most focused on for this next season, who I'm most curious about how they're going to do inside the SEC, it's Temple, and they signed just 3 4-stars. What I've learned is these preseason polls are just a reflection of where all these teams basically finished last season. So I don't think Temple is going to be a top 18 team in the country. It's still interesting to see some of these projections, but I feel like none of this tells us too much. I'm ready to see what happens this season. Starting in the SEC, where is Temple going to be? Can you take a wild guess? Notre Dame's at the very top. I don't see Temple yet, though. Tulane is going down alongside Arkansas and Temple. It's unfortunate, but it was inevitable, and Memphis finishing in the top 3 inside the ACC. They're headed on to the SEC now. That's a huge jump for the Tigers. Tennessee headed back up too. And as a whole, I think this is the best year the ACC's had in quite a while, especially for being a tier 2 conference. Headed down though, North Texas loses their head coach, loses quarterbacks. What do you want them to do? They went 1-11, Vanderbilt back down, Nevada back down. I figured North Texas was eventually going to find some sustained success, but they're going to be straight back in the American, where Stanford's trying to escape. East Carolina could be the team that prevents it. And how many times is Nevada going back down to the Mountain West Conference? UTEP has gone undefeated though. They beat Louisville. So I don't know if Louisville's going to get out this year, but they're in the conference championship again. And for Vanderbilt in the Sun Belt, well, their return isn't going to be looked forward to by schools like James Madison, who are only able to put together an 8-4 season after being relegated. For the other top of the pyramid, this conference produced 3 of the top 4 teams in the country. Oklahoma State took a little bit of a step back, but 8-4 still is not bad for them. Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, all dropping. While at the same time, we're seeing San Diego State go up. Boise State came very close to it. They were tied with them in conference play alongside Baylor and Maryland. So this is another small school making it up to that top tier. I'm really proud of them for that, but movement happens all over the place because now a couple years later, West Virginia, they're getting relegated again. UMass, a team that went from tier 3 all the way to tier 1, is back down to that 3rd tier. UCF's been at that 3rd tier multiple times. And they better get used to Conference USA, where Western Kentucky is the only undefeated team in conference play. They beat BYU. We'll see if BYU can beat them in the conference championship. While over in the MAC, UMass will be sitting in this conference. Northwestern, the only Power 4 team that continues to sit here. And for the Pac-12, I think it makes perfect sense for them to welcome West Virginia. They've already welcomed so many other former Big 12 schools. All in all, headed into conference championship week, these are all of the movements that we know are going to happen so far. But the real difference maker for these teams has been these conference championship games, and there's a couple that interest me. Either Fresno State, who's lost a couple games but ranked above UTEP, or undefeated UTEP and Louisville Louisville having another opportunity to get free, I think we got to see Louisville. Just because there is no way they continue to struggle to get out of this conference. They've lost 3 of the last 4 conference championships, and they don't want to make it 4 for 5. The Miners, though, beat them already, and they're undefeated. You can't just overlook UTEP and think it's going to be an easy win for the Cardinals, because there have been other teams that we thought could be an easy win, and they've not found a way to come out on top of those games. This one might be no different. Arnold Higgins currently has them at the 40. He's a left-handed quarterback that has put them on the map this season. If they score a touchdown, they would beat Louisville, and it is looking more and more likely. With a clean pocket, he's going to get his 3rd straight completion. It's not like they've been large gains at once, but they've been chipping away at this defense. They continue to play some soft coverage. They're going to hit him. I think Louisville's putting a little bit too much faith into their pass rush that isn't getting home. Once again, breaking the tackle as well inside the red zone. It is not looking good for the Cardinals. How many passes are they completing in a row? What I don't agree with is this use of a timeout. I just always think it's better if you have at least one saved up, because you never know what's going to happen. They drop it. That was the touchdown that was going to do it. There's still 33 seconds left on the clock, too. You want to run off a little bit more. This is where having that one timeout, though, could be a very big deal. Maybe you want to mix in a run. Maybe you get stopped even shorter than zone. There's only 20 seconds left. You don't know what's going to happen. Don't take a sack. That's the only thing that would ruin them, because at the moment, their clock management has been perfect. It's worked out how they wanted, even though it could have backfired. 3rd and goal, though. You have 2 plays to get 5 yards. Is Louisville going to hang on? No, just no. That's all I have to say about that throw. Try and force it or something. Maybe throw an interception. It all comes down to this. Is Louisville going to get that conference championship win? There's a flag on the play, and it is against the Cardinals. It was 4th and goal. The refs are giving UTEP a lifeline. That pass interference puts them on the 1-yard line. They have 2 plays to get into the end zone here, basically. We'll see what type of coverage Louisville is in. It was some zone. They find a receiver, and it does not matter if you ice on an extra point. This is how the Cardinals are going to fall, and it is sweet. They've literally just been stealing some of UK's best players in the transfer portal period, so this makes me happy. Even if it's just a video game, at least something isn't going their way. Now, if they pulled off an 86-yard touchdown, that would be pretty wild, but they're just going to have to throw this one on the run. It's going to be caught. He stayed on his feet, too. But he was not able to break free, so the Mountain West is going to go to UTEP. As for some of these other conference championship results, I cannot believe my eyes. Western Kentucky takes down BYU, so they continue to be stuck in Conference USA. You're going to see Fresno State beating Iowa State by 17. Then we had the MAC championship between Jacksonville State, Miami, Ohio. Jacksonville State is going to get out of the MAC. Old Dominion wins the Sun Belt. I feel like I said they'd have success in the Sun Belt at some point. And then East Carolina beat Stanford. I forgot that they were trying to escape, too. Outside of Season 1, this might be the first time that every single team that's got promoted up to a Tier 2 conference has been a Group of 6 school. But even after programs make that first jump, we haven't seen anyone sustain success at a higher level yet. Ole Miss is going to have the Heisman Trophy winner. It doesn't shock me. He was the leading receiver in the country this season, though DeMarco Isaacs on UTEP, he had 19 receiving touchdowns, so I'd say he had a better season statistically. And for some of these other positions like running back, these guys just weren't going to ever compete for a Heisman Trophy, even if the seasons were still solid. At quarterback, USC had the leading passer in the country, but he also threw 7 interceptions. Some of these leading passers are throwing the football so much that they're turning it over in the double digits. And yes, that included UTEP's Arnold Higgins, but keep this in mind. The season before this one, he threw 14 touchdowns to 24 interceptions, so this was a massive improvement. He also took a lot less sacks. The Miners took major steps forward on that side of the ball. If we look at the playoff picture, the only Group of 6 team in here, Fresno State, lost to Tennessee. Tennessee we've seen struggle in the past, but now we got our national championship set, Penn State and Auburn. Both of these schools are currently in a Tier 1 conference, and Auburn's head coach is Rich Rodriguez, so if he would have just stayed at West Virginia, maybe they wouldn't have struggled as much. I have to assume that he got fired a long time ago, though, from West Virginia, and ever since, he's just been bouncing around at different colleges. He somehow stumbled his way into the Auburn job, and it's gone really well for him. They're up by 17 with 20 seconds left in the national championship, so yes, this game is over. Good catch, though. Or maybe it wasn't. Apparently, that ball fell out of his hands. Anyway, the Tigers take it home, and that's going to give Auburn their second national championship in this video. Currently, they're tied with Notre Dame for the most so far since promotion and relegation became a thing at 2. I'm tracking that as well. We're 8 seasons out of 20 deep. I want to see who can win the most national championships. Patrick Scully, UCLA's head coach, has been hired at Florida State. And for other head coach movements, I'm not seeing too much, though Memphis losing their head coach to the NFL has got to sting. Just when they were getting promoted to the SEC, he decides to leave for the NFL. It's crazy to me, but Shane Beamer has ended up at Temple after being fired by the Seminoles. That's a great hire for them. Maybe we start to see Temple have a little bit more of sustained success. Their class rank isn't going to be pretty. It's going to be 85th in the country, but it's because they didn't need many positions filled this next year. They are coming off of a very big underperformance inside the SEC, though. For some of these top classes, you look for the outlier programs, but you got to scroll pretty far to find them. And even the outlier signings aren't that common. You're mostly just going to see the big schools scooping up the biggest prospects, but that is very realistic to what happens during real life. Auburn signing one of the top quarterback transfers just lets me know that their success is going to continue on this file. Michigan State, though, picking up a decent one. They got another 4-star quarterback. Yeah, Auburn is going to have plenty of options. Unfortunately for the Tigers, though, the conference that they play in continues to stay stacked. As we just look at these preseason conference projections, you're literally going to see 75% of the conference ranked inside the top 25, while the Big Ten takes up a lot of those other spots, and the only other conference to have teams ranked inside the top 25 is going to be the ACC. That's right, the Big 12 doesn't have a single ranked program in it, but we'll see how that changes throughout the course of the season. We do have to see who's falling down to the Big 12 first, though. The Big 10 at the top of college football at the moment. They have the top 3 teams in the country. Maybe Oregon wins their national championship this season. We've seen Oklahoma State take a little bit of a step back, but San Diego State did very well in their first season here. I figured they would have been at the bottom where Texas Tech, Colorado, and UCLA are, all falling down to the Big 12. They will be replaced by Iowa, Boise State, and Fresno State, by the way. Fresno State just recently made this jump up, and now they're going all the way to Tier 1 alongside Boise State. I can't imagine that move's going to go too well for them, though. They could have moved up a little bit too soon. You don't want to accelerate that fast. Toledo, Missouri State, Kansas State are all getting demoted. Ohio just avoided it, even though they finished 2-7. And Kansas State will just become another former Big 12 team to land in the Pac-12 and potentially get stuck here. They literally finished as the worst teams in this conference outside of Washington State. It's remarkable. Meanwhile, Toledo will be returning to the MAC conference, where Akron had a really good season. They're ranked 19th in the country, but it wasn't enough to make the conference championship, having a shot at promotion. And for Missouri State, well, they'll be headed back to Conference USA. New Mexico State has been the best team in this conference, but they still have to beat UCF to get their promotion spot. So we'll see how that all works out. Duke is currently on top of the SEC. Lots of teams in that playoff hunt still. Memphis, they're going to survive their first season in the SEC. With all of these talented teams, these are the 3 that are going down. And they're being replaced by Pittsburgh, North Carolina, and Tulane. Tulane has done it. UTEP actually had an incredible season too. They're ranked 15th in the country, but they just didn't have what it took to get this final spot in the tiebreaker. Though I think the most interesting part about the ACC to me this season is all of these former pretty large programs just struggling to barely get above 500 or maybe below it here. We got Old Dominion, Wake Forest, East Carolina going back down. And I know Wake Forest isn't anywhere near out west, but at least there are some mountains in North Carolina. Just not sure if they're around that area. That is where the Demon Deacons will be falling. If Louisville can finally escape, they're number 10 in the country, then this conference shouldn't be too challenging for them. Though East Carolina just needed to stay promoted because they're coming back to the American that continues to get a little bit better every season. You have programs like Stanford, Virginia, USF, Virginia Tech here, even North Texas that could always make a run at it. And finally, Old Dominion back to the Sun Belt. It was pretty competitive this season. James Madison just went 6-6. You're seeing Vanderbilt, Boston College kind of fall into the trap of not being able to compete much in this conference. Who knows if they're going to be able to escape in the future. Deciding which of these conference championship games that we should watch, though, is hard because I think this is a great game for Marshall and UAB to potentially get promoted. They're both ranked. But at the same time, the Louisville hate watch must continue, so we're going to actually watch 2 conference championships. With the Cardinals staying stuck in a Tier 3 conference, they're actually making it harder for some of these other smaller programs to escape because they always have to play them. Though eventually it was inevitable that Louisville would find success in one of these games. Hawaii trying to make something happen in the final 10 seconds, sliding down short. I just can't imagine they're going to score a touchdown, get an onside kick, and then have success with the Hail Mary, but they get the snap off quick enough. They have someone open in the end zone. Is there any time left on the clock? It says there is 1 second remaining. They could recover this onside kick still as well. Wild. But will they actually get to the ball? No, they're not. Louisville will catch it. That is it. And so after year of struggling, the Cardinals have finally escaped the Mountain West. As for the other promotion game I was interested in, Matt Campbell is coaching for Marshall. He's gotten them to 10-2. But are they going to be able to beat the Blazers, which is a team that's been getting closer and closer to making the American Conference Championship for years? Well, you see where UAB is at with a minute left, but here's the thing. Marshall at one point in this game was up 35-7. So they have choked away a huge lead, 29-3 run. The Blazers are hot right now. They're trying to pull off one of the greatest comebacks of all time for promotion. And Marquez Davis is the one leading the way. That's going to put them at the 21. Coming out in a tighter formation, I'd be looking for a corner route here. but that wasn't the read. And once again, they're going to get off a spike to stop the clock. They still have 37 seconds to get about another 35, 40 yards. That's what they're going to need for comfortable field goal range. But they've already lost one down. Throwing it away makes it 3rd and 10. You have 2 plays to pick up 10 yards. Scrambling seemed like the best option. Though you have to keep in mind that clock continues to run. You panic in those moments. 15 seconds left now. 4th and 6. Marquez Davis throws it, and UAB could have gotten out of bounds. He didn't reach for the sideline, though. They have no timeouts remaining, and there's no way they feel comfortable sending out their kicker to attempt like a 63-yarder, so you just have to send up one final Hail Mary. The throw barely got out. They are lucky there is still 1 second left on the clock. Are the Blazers going to pull off one of the greatest comebacks of all time? He has the time to chuck this one up, and it is going to be swatted, but it was close. Marshall hangs on in the final seconds, and we'll see how long they can stay up in Tier 2. For some of these other conference championship results, you're going to see that New Mexico State beat UCF by 3 points, so they just got promoted from Conference USA. UConn lost to Utah State in the Pac-12. Eastern Michigan beat Central Michigan, who was ranked at the time, and for the final result out of the Sun Belt, we got Appalachian State destroying Southern Miss. For a lot of these teams moving up this season, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to stay in the conference that they're joining, but they've done one of the hardest parts, making that jump in the first place, and UConn had a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, but they still weren't able to get promotion. That has to be so frustrating for them. Louisville ended up getting into the playoff because they were the highest ranked conference champion. Boise State made it too. They must have won either the ACC or Big 12, whichever Tier 2 conference they're in. And it is the Big 12, which I remember before the season saying had 0 ranked teams. Well, it's gonna finish with 5 of them. As for some of our stat leaders, you're gonna notice that the top 3 quarterbacks in passing yards all come from group of 6 schools, which is really neat to see. Even Louisiana Monroe is putting up some really great numbers if you ignore the 12 interceptions. And Boise State might not have Ashton Genty back, but they did have the leading rusher in the country, just not for rushing touchdowns. 24 out of Joe Baggs on Marshall. That could explain why they were able to win. He's a junior, so we'll see if he returns for his senior season. What a year out of Addison Pickering as well. That is why Louisiana Monroe's quarterback was able to throw for the most passing yards in the country. If they can just retain a lot of their roster, I wouldn't be surprised if they make a run at the Sun Belt next season for promotion. They went 5-4 in conference play. And our national championship game is once again going to be a matchup between USC and Oregon. If the Ducks lose this one again, I'm just going to have to chalk it up to the fact that they're cursed. They have one of the best defenses in the country. Last season, though, they went 5-7. So just the fact that they were able to bounce back from that, they didn't get rid of Dan Lanning, they kept him around, they trusted him to make it back to the national championship, is incredible in itself. They've made it here, and the Trojans seemingly are in control with 1.5 minutes remaining. At least Oregon was able to force a drop there. USC had to really work to even get this ball back and drive down the field in the first place. And now on 3rd and 3, you had to drag open underneath. They have the first. John Caroma does just enough to keep their touchdown hopes alive. A touchdown wins this game. Oregon had the pick. And if you have been paying close attention, they had a chance at winning a national championship, but dropped an interception. I think the last time they made an appearance in this game. Now USC is able to take time off of the clock. If this is how the Ducks go down, it is going to be pure heartbreak for them. RPO, he's open in the flat. No one there. USC is in. Oregon might have just choked another national championship. You can't make this up. Without blocking the extra point, they have to drive down the field for a touchdown. And I just don't see that happening in 23 seconds. I don't think I have seen a team that's more unlucky than that. As I'm filming this, they're playing Indiana tonight for a chance to play Miami in the national championship in real life. So maybe they come out on top of that game. I just know that their running back room's depleted. Same with their cornerback room. The transfer portal period has not been kind, all because college football just can't figure out a schedule that actually works. I digress though. Maybe one day they will. 12 seconds left. 3 straight completions. It is at least giving Oregon a chance to pull this one off. You got to send this ball out, though. You can't take a sack. I don't think they're getting off another snap. USC's defense holds on. The drive down the field won them the national championship, and Oregon just collapsed again. I did a little digging after the game, though, and I found something very intriguing. Joe Duck's favorite school growing up was USC, and he committed there out of high school. Now, he eventually transferred to Oregon, but maybe he still wanted his favorite team to win it all. He sure did not lead them successfully there. Marshall is going to retain their star running back, though, but here's the issue. They had a sophomore quarterback as a 93 overall that's drafted in the 2nd round, so that's probably why they were also that good. If you were thinking maybe they picked somebody up in the transfer portal period, they didn't. They signed one 4-star, and it is going to be a a cornerback. Looking at some of these top classes, I mean, it's the same thing every year. I think I've said that a few times now. Even when we have seen teams consistently crack the top 25 like NC State, they haven't been putting out the best product on the field. Tulane up to number 33 this year. And Boise State was sitting at number 37. They brought in quarterback Dallas Toll, a 4-star. That could elevate them quite far, as he's the 28th best transfer. Those are the types of signings that you have to make. Illinois actually stole a left tackle from Ohio State. That one threw me off, but for the most part, a lot of these are going to make sense for what school they decide to choose. But I will say, just looking at the top quarterback transfers this year, you have schools like Pittsburgh, schools like Iowa, Auburn, even SMU is down here a little bit. These are all Power 4 schools that have found success, and they're signing those big quarterback transfers. Now, something I haven't really tracked much has been these conference prestiges, just to see how they've changed over the years. I'm not surprised the Pac-12 is the best Tier 3 conference because it is made up of a lot of Big 12 schools. But I think that list just gives you a good idea of what the easiest conferences are to escape, what the most challenging ones are for some of these teams to escape. I don't know if Boise State and Fresno State are going to live up to these preseason expectations. There are the most group of 6 schools that we've ever seen in the top 25. And as I'm just sitting here waiting for it to get to the end of the year, I realized we're at the midway point. This is season 10, and I was curious if Oregon was going to have a chance at making another run at a championship, but they are not up at the top of the Big Ten standings. Oklahoma State finds themselves back up there, though. So does Iowa. You know, they're picking up those good quarterbacks in the portal. Boise State and Fresno State both went 8-4 in the Big Ten, so good years for them. San Diego State is going to avoid falling down, while Penn State gets relegated for the second time. And who will be replacing them? Well, teams like Colorado and UCLA that have already been up in the Big Ten multiple times. They keep on bouncing between the two conferences. Then we have TCU as that third team. All of those programs make sense to me. New Mexico State is going to survive after being promoted here. So does Eastern Michigan, but Utah State does not. They're falling down with Ohio and Western Kentucky. Ohio will fall back to the MAC conference, which has still stayed pretty similar to what it was whenever we started this whole thing. It's just Northwestern is at the bottom of it every single year. Then Western Kentucky can come back to Conference USA. Either BYU or UCF is going to escape. I figured at some point those teams would make a push again. But their prestige has fallen pretty far. Wake Forest was 1 game away from making it to the conference championship, but instead either Hawaii or Wyoming will get promoted for the second time. That's the conference Utah State will be joining. And then we look at the SEC, where Kentucky isn't having success. That was the biggest thing that I was honestly tracking. I wanted to see Kentucky at the top, but instead, they're at the bottom. Notre Dame is falling down with the Wildcats, though. And I think UTEP just got promoted from the ACC at the perfect time. They've followed up last season and the season before that. These seasons where they continue to build with another good one, just taking away that spot from Syracuse. All while this Tier 2 conference continues to be filled with more and more SEC schools, there's just no way that after getting promoted, Louisville is going to fall back down. In this 5-way tiebreaker, they're the team that loses out. Fortunately for the Cardinals, though, when teams like App State belong to the Sun Belt, that's where they're going to fall. And then with Temple headed back to the American, there's only one conference Louisville is headed to. It will be the Mountain West Conference. I think I got confused a second ago and said this is where Utah State's going to be headed, but Utah State is going to be headed to the Pac-12, where UConn went undefeated in conference play. West Virginia trying to get out again. But anyway, yes, for clarification, Louisville to the Mountain West and Utah State to the Pac-12. That's just because of how these pyramids have been divided. Now we have to decide which of these promotional games has the highest stakes. It gives conference championships meaning, that is for sure. And I think the one I want to spectate is UConn versus West Virginia. Over the past 3 seasons, the Huskies have consistently gotten better and better, and now they find themselves in this big matchup. We can say all these guys really want that trophy, but truthfully, it's just getting promotion into the Big 12. And unfortunately for Connecticut, they find themselves not with the football, down by 1 point. West Virginia threw it, but they couldn't reach the marker, so this one's not completely over. If they miss this field goal, they are literally setting up the Huskies in a great position to get in field goal range themselves. That was just a risk that if I'm a coach, if I have a college kicker, unless he is special like what Ole Miss has, there is no way I am going to take that risk there. It all worked out for them, though. The Huskies only have 10 seconds to do anything, and with time running out after taking that sack, the Mountaineers have been able to escape the Pac-12. They're not going to be stuck here for very long. It is pretty remarkable to me, though, that there's been a point in this video where of the 9 teams in the Pac-12, 66% of them originally came from the Big 12. A lot of those teams just suffering from relegation, and this pop-up is a major deal for Akron. Again, I just picked them for this video as the team I was going to simulate on because I figured they'd do nothing over the 20-year time frame, but they just got promoted into the Big 12. All while BYU is going to handle UCF pretty easily for promotion, Hawaii is going to take down Wyoming, Wyoming by 9 points. We got Louisiana Tech beating Georgia State by 3 for their first promotion in this video. And finally, Charlotte took down Rice. Charlotte is moving up to the ACC. Alongside Akron, Charlotte's another football program I would have never expected to even get promotion once. And we'll see if these teams can build off of that, because both of them are in the college football playoff. Another shocker here is just the fact that the Miners made it. And do you know who the Heisman Trophy winner went to? It wasn't Georgia State's receiver who had 20 touchdowns, 1,600 yards. No, it was the Virginia Tech receiver, Lamont Self, who almost had 2,000 receiving yards. Keep in mind, he did this in the American Conference, where the Hokies finished 5th. They've been stuck here in Tier 3 for a while. And I can only imagine where they'd be without him, because I think this is the greatest receiver season we've seen over the course of these 10 years so far. What I was expecting was for Virginia Tech's quarterback to be one of the top passers in the country if you have a 2,000-yard receiver, but that just hasn't been the case at all. And it looks like Joe Baggs, the running back on Marshall we were tracking from last season, just didn't find as much success in a much harder conference. He couldn't even crack 1,000 rushing yards. He was so far down that list, but I'm not surprised by some of these other names that I'm seeing. UAB's been successful recently. So is Old Dominion, 16 rushing touchdowns, leading rusher. And if you were curious about how those smaller schools did in the playoffs, well, none of them made it out of the first round. The Miners came the closest to winning their game. The national championship will be between Michigan and Nebraska. And it's been such a long time since the national championship has featured a team from a Tier 2 conference. It's just been the SEC and the Big Ten, but mainly the Big Ten dominating. I still believe the reason they're having more success than the SEC is because of how deep of a conference the SEC has been. It's very hard to put together a great season inside of it. But in recent years, the SEC has lost a lot of their bigger programs to relegation. Nebraska's not winning this game. Truth is, Michigan was just too hard to take down, so there's another national championship for the Wolverines. And over the past 2 seasons, a lot of the staff moves haven't been that major of a deal, but Dabo Swinney has now left Clemson twice to go back to Alabama. He continues to bounce between all of these programs. Texas is also losing their head coach to Texas A&M. Oklahoma State's Ben Durr, who's had a lot of success with the Cowboys, now takes the job at Notre Dame. And that's because Lane Kiffin was fired there, who's headed to Georgia Tech. Apparently, Luke Fickell stumbled to Charlotte, which is why they started to have some success, but he has now left them for Minnesota. And for some of the bigger programs that haven't done well recently, where you got Mike Elko, John Summerall, Marcus Freeman, all at these big-time schools, they're just going to swap around coaches. They're going to have to get fired. They're going to have schools like Clemson replacing their head coach with New Mexico State. So I have to say, sometimes the trickle-down effect works out pretty well, because Temple was able to get Jim Knowles from Texas A&M, who just fired him, and the Owls need this since they recently got relegated back down to the American. Sometimes those big-time signings, if their recruiter head coaches can bring in really good classes to schools that typically would not get them, what I want to see is sustained success from Tulane and Boise State in recruiting. If they're going to continue to succeed, Boise State is at least up here. But it seems like for a majority of these smaller programs that have been able to find a little bit of success, like UTEP, I mean, they made the playoffs this past year. Their class rankings are still just inside the top 50. As we head into season 11, Michigan, who just went undefeated winning it all, is not favored to win the national championship. USC has been pretty good. I've also noticed teams like Syracuse, UTEP, Oklahoma State pushing for a playoff spot again. We'll see if it can happen. I think it's going to be another great season, and of all the potential Heisman winners, at least at the start of the year, only one of them is on a ranked team. I'm just going to start off by saying this season is going to come with all sorts of surprises when you see some of these teams' records, but looking at the SEC first, Tulane, UTEP, and Memphis are all able to stay up, while Pittsburgh, SMU, and Texas A&M are dropping down to the ACC. And it was a close call between either Florida State or Notre Dame that was going to be that third program that is able to win promotion back up there. Notre Dame's going to go back up to the SEC alongside Syracuse and Florida. I think Florida's been trapped here for a while, so that's a big deal for them. A lot of SEC schools might not ever be able to escape, but the conference is going to be a lot more competitive next season, I think, because 3 group of 6 teams did awful in conference play, and they're not returning. In fact, those 3 programs are the same 3 programs that all got promoted last season. So that is going to lead to where things get really interesting. Rice is currently the number 2 team in the country. They are undefeated, but they have to beat Tulsa to even win promotion in the first place. The American is the conference that Charlotte will be back in next year. And I just have to point out that UAB is all of a sudden falling apart. They must have lost some of their key players. Stanford and Virginia Tech also at the bottom of this conference. Not sure if they're ever going to escape the Tier 3 conferences. Hawaii's headed back to the Mountain West, Louisville with another opportunity to get out of here. And then, of course, Louisiana Tech will be back in the Sun Belt. Vanderbilt has not been able to make it out, though, since they fell like 5 or 6 seasons ago. They didn't even make it to the conference championship game. Boise State continues to put together some good seasons. They just went 9-3, but it's not going to be enough to get a playoff spot. And they're not the only former Pac-12 team that's being established in the Big Ten season after season. Fresno State, San Diego State also finishing mid-table. While Oregon was closely approaching the bottom, they still had 4 conference wins. But I'm not sure when we're going to see them competing for another national championship. Michigan State just avoids relegation for Iowa, Colorado, and Maryland to get sent back down. I feel like they've been bouncing between the 2 leagues so much. As for the 3 moving back up to the top, it is Illinois, Penn State, and Wisconsin. New Mexico State came extremely close, but in a 3-way tiebreaker, they weren't able to win promotion. And Texas Tech came very close to getting sent down to a Tier 3 conference, even after all the money that they spend, but instead it'll be Oregon State, Akron, and Jacksonville State all relegated. For all 6 of the teams being relegated this season, they're headed back to their original conferences. And Jacksonville State's going to find themselves in Conference USA, which should be a little bit easier after either Cincinnati or UCF wins it, getting to finally escape. As for Akron and the MAC, UMass has a shot to get out of here again. They've had a couple good seasons that they've been able to put together. And I'm truly not shocked in the Pac-12 that Oregon State's headed back to. UConn has another good season. I don't know if they're going to beat Arizona in the conference championship. That's their only way out. But they keep making it to this game. Their trajectory seems to be going up. I think it makes sense. The only conference championship we can watch is between Tulsa and Rice, because there's an opportunity for Rice to go undefeated all year and then still not get promoted, while also being a playoff team. But look at this. Mike Norvell is Tulsa's head coach since taking over. He's gotten them to a bowl game both years. And I'm starting to understand why the Golden Hurricanes have found a little bit of success. If they're able to beat Rice here, they might even be competing for a playoff spot. I didn't quite look at who the 5th highest rated conference champion was going to be. You have to imagine, though, a win over one of the top 2 teams in the country would elevate you pretty far in the rankings. And Tulsa needs something to go their way here. They have 3 timeouts left, but they're down by 5. So they're going to have to stop the run. And at least they were able to on that play. I didn't realize how big Rice's stadium is. It looks like it's ready for the ACC, but they're on a 3rd and 11 after that drop. And Tulsa isn't able to lock down. They have to call another timeout. So the odds of getting this ball back now are extremely low. And that's going to do it. Rice is going to win the conference. It's hard to tell how good this team really is because ultimately they played a pretty weak schedule. The best win was Houston. And Houston's been relegated in the Pac-12 for so long that they're now a 1-star program. Stanley Tinker won the Heisman Trophy. He was on the watch list. It doesn't shock me at all. USC typically leads the country in passing yards. You have to get those yards to somebody. Brian Silvestro threw for almost 5,046 touchdowns. ULM, though, consistently up there as well. And Georgia State didn't get back to the conference championship game even with a senior running back that was the best in the country, but they've been building some success for a Tier 3 program too. I guess we still have to check some other conference championship results, but I just got so curious about some of these season stats beforehand. And it seems like in the Sun Belt, South Alabama was able to take care of business. They put up 42 points, while UMass only scored 10 on Miami, Ohio, losing that game. Louisville is going to handle business against Wyoming, so they are out again. Connecticut finally wins the conference, and Cincinnati beats UCF. Those results are going to give us these 6 promotions. And although we're going to see 2 teams in the national championship, USC and Nebraska, that have been there very recently, there was a very shocking result in this playoff, and that was Rice beating Michigan, who won it all last season, in the quarterfinal before losing to the Trojans by 39. They got obliterated, but Lincoln Riley stayed with the Trojans this entire time. He's already won them 2 national championships, and I think that's still going to be a moment that Rice is able to build off of. Is Nebraska going to get revenge for losing in the championship last year, though? That is what I'm wondering. It is just another year of this game being the Big Ten versus the Big Ten. And with about 30 seconds left on the clock, USC is currently trailing by 8 points. So they need a touchdown. They need the 2-point conversion, but the touchdown is going to come right here. They want that 3rd national championship. They are still alive. They have hope. The RPO, though, is not caught. And so that's basically going to do it, unless they can get lucky with the onside kick, which Nebraska originally did miss on the recovery. Then it's all going to be over. The Cornhuskers are able to make up for losing last year. And we still have a 3-way tie between Auburn, USC, and Notre Dame for teams that have been able to get the most national championships in this video. All 3 of them have 2. But I forgot to look at coaching changes, so I scrolled through this entire list of potential head coaches out there. Anybody that has a record with their team at 0-0, I was able to see as a mover, but nothing too surprising changed. Basically, if a team got relegated or a Power 4 program has been struggling in a Tier 3 conference for a while, they just got rid of their head coach, tried to bring in somebody new. Though the one team that lost the most is UTEP, because they had a very good head coach, except they replaced him with Brent Venables, and he's apparently already on the hot seat. They're trying to raise the standard there as fast as they can, but when you're signing the 58th best class, it's going to be very challenging to do so. Between Memphis, Tulane, and UTEP, only 3 4-stars were brought in this season, but I think the more surprising thing I've noticed is a lot of these SEC schools are not signing the top classes. Only 4 of the top 17 are going to SEC schools. So that kind of shows why the Big Ten has been so dominant the past few years, because they're getting a lot of the best talent instead of the SEC, which is what used to happen. Now that a lot of these players are fake too, it's a lot harder for me to be very invested in where a lot of the transfers go. But Trevor Harris is a 5-star quarterback transfer that has left Oregon to play for California. That blows my mind. While I was signing the best transfer receiver in the class, I should also point out that Oregon just went 7-5. They signed the number 22 class in the country. They literally might not make it back to the national championship game ever. They're losing a lot of their best players. And Cal actually upgraded their quarterback situation after Jackson Sankey decided he'd rather play for Lincoln Riley and USC. It makes sense though. They have the best passer in the country almost every year. I just can't believe I see Iowa signing so many good offensive players. As respectable as it's been for what they've done to their offense, they continue to be relegated from the Big Ten, and it's just been a cycle of promotion, relegation, back and forth. As the highest overall team in the Big 12, I expect them to win the conference this season. It really feels like Nebraska and USC are just going to duel it out for a national championship game as well. That's what the projections have Oklahoma State inside the top 5. And of course, transfer Trevor Harris is in the Heisman projections after choosing Cal. For the season that Cal had as a team, finishing 6-6, I'm expecting he's not going to win the Heisman Trophy. We saw Rice, though, handle their promotion really well. They almost got promotion again, finishing 1 game behind Oklahoma, who's headed back to the SEC alongside Ole Miss and Florida State. And when it comes to what teams are going to be dropping down, you'll see at the top, Memphis is in the top 5. So Memphis has continued to have sustained success there, but Tulane is going to fall alongside UTEP and Arkansas. It feels like that was inevitable for a couple of those teams. Once you get promoted up to the Tier 1 conferences, very hard to stay there and keep your footing, especially if you're working with limited resources. Louisville cannot stay in a Tier 2 conference, though. Them, North Carolina, and Mississippi State are all dropping. If I was really hating on Louisville, I wouldn't continue to put them back in the Mountain West, which I think they're going to have no problem escaping. Looks like Wake Forest will do it this year. And Mississippi State makes sense for a Sun Belt fit. Look at Boston College and Vanderbilt, though, both stringing together seasons that could finally have them escaping. They have been there for far too long. I also thought USF would have a bit more success. They're in the conference championship game against Tulsa, who has a chance to win it again. This is the conference North Carolina is going to be a part of next year. And for our other top-tier conference, Boise State is number 3 in the country alongside number 4 Ohio State, number 2 Nebraska, number 1 Michigan, and number 7 USC. This is such a great conference right now. They've been on such a dominant run. It's why I'm surprised Fresno State can even go 7-5. The fact that they aren't being relegated, and you see programs like Illinois, Michigan State headed down, San Diego State even held their own for a while before dropping. Just a wild turn of events. Overall is not everything though, because you'll see Iowa could not go undefeated in the Big 12. I guess they were an 86 overall. I feel like at one point they were a 91, so maybe they had some injuries. Texas Tech is headed back to the Big Ten with Iowa and Cincinnati. And near mid-table of this conference, you're going to see New Mexico State continues to just hang around in it. Eastern Michigan, they are also not the team getting relegated because BYU has fallen again. UConn just went 2-10 after having some incredible seasons, and Miami, Ohio also down. We're going to stick UConn in Conference USA, though, where UCF literally couldn't even go over 500. They are not having great years, while FIU and Jacksonville State, both teams that have been promoted at some point, looking for another promotion. And BYU is going to take that Pac-12 spot. One of the Big 12 schools coming back up, though, between Iowa State and Kansas State in the conference championship. While Miami, Ohio will, of course, be back in the MAC. Northwestern finally put together a pretty good season. UMass is ranked, though, while Kent State is not, mainly because no one expected the Golden Flashes to go 11-1. I can't say the Minutemen have done anything too impressive that deserves a ranking, but they have had some good seasons, so I guess that's getting them some credit. Doesn't make much sense to me, but these are the changes that we'll be seeing. I'm not sure if Mississippi State is going to escape the Sun Belt soon either. We've just seen some Power 4 programs get stuck there. It's only now that Vanderbilt or Boston College is going to get out. I think the conference championship game that we should check out, though, isn't between the two ranked opponents. No, it's between Tulsa and USF, because USF has been waiting for this chance. They've put a lot of money into their football program, including building a new stadium, but they have very rarely done anything so far. And this is their chance to change all of that, to get promoted, to start building up some momentum, even if they fall back down another season after. On paper, their team shouldn't compete much with Tulsa's. But who knows? They could be well coached. They already get to play this game in their stadium. With how hard rain has been coming down in this game, you can see that it has not helped Tulsa's play style. They're used to just airing the ball out, but Mike Burks has not been able to do that. 10 seconds left on the clock, down by 12. You got to throw it away. Can't take a sack there. Regroup, send up a quick shot to the end zone, hope that you get lucky. They got a lot they need to go their way, but USF is the one that comes down with the catch. And so for the second season in a row, Tulsa is not able to get promotion out of the American. It's also going to eliminate them from playoff contention, which they were 11th before the game. They would have been in the playoff without playing. Now FIU is going to take that final spot after beating Jacksonville State in the Conference USA Championship. And I guess the polls had it correct because UMass was a better team than Kent State. They're able to get promotion while Wake Forest lost 57-0 to Hawaii. This is the biggest beating we've seen this entire video. Look at the stat differences. How do you lose this poorly? I just cannot imagine the Demon Deacons let Cole Flowers return as their quarterback next year. And for the last two Tier 3 conference championships, which only featured Power 4 teams, we have Iowa State beating Kansas State, and we have Vanderbilt beating Boston College. I feel like of all these teams, we've just seen Hawaii go up and down so much. They just can't get their footing in the ACC. But who knows, maybe this next season is going to be the one for them. Jacksonville State just produced a Heisman Trophy winner despite losing in the conference championship, and he's a junior. So if Josh Biggums returns to that team for next season, they should be earning promotion. Just comparing his stats to the rest of the country, though, if I was handing out the Heisman Trophy, I would have given it to the Nebraska quarterback. 45 touchdowns for Johnny with only 2 interceptions. We also saw Bill Capps have an incredible rushing season for Florida State, almost 2,000 rushing yards on the ground. A Michigan running back being up here doesn't surprise me. FIU had success, so they had to have a top rusher. And 2 of the top 3 receivers in the country this season played for the Cornhuskers. I have to imagine that they're near the top of the AP poll. Headed into this playoff, they've got 2 losses, but they're the number 2 team in the country. Boise State actually lost out on a first-round bye, all because I'm guessing their strength of schedule, even in the best conference, wasn't as good as some of those other teams. And if you're cheering for Rice, this is going to be the most disheartening news. Despite being number 11, they are not in the playoff. I can't imagine there's many Rice fans out there, but their spot got taken away by Iowa, who won the Big 12, and then FIU, who was the 5th highest rated conference champion. And by the time we get to the national championship game, you'll see Michigan's back there being undefeated, 15-0, facing off against Georgia. Boise State beat FIU, but then they lost by 6 to Florida State. I still feel like they're building up some good momentum, though, and Kirby Smart's been at Georgia this entire time. I think the fact that they're just making it back to the national championship now after all these years shows how competitive the SEC has been. It's been difficult for them, but Derek St. John has 5,000 passing yards, and he's got an opportunity to win it all. Both of these teams are looking to be tied with all those other programs for having 2 national championships in this video. And it is going to be the season that the SEC finally has success again. Georgia is extremely close to being able to close this one out. And we're going to have to check the history after this game because it might have been like 5 or 6 years since they've won it. I literally think the last time an SEC school even appeared in the national championship was Georgia. And Michigan doesn't even seem like they want to put up a fighting chance. They're going to survive this 4th down. No timeouts remaining though, only 19 seconds. They truly need a miracle. Just taking the check down. That's not the play there. By the time they get set, they have their play call ready. 3 seconds on the clock. Unless this is an immediate touchdown, the game is over. Georgia is going to win. And Kirby Smart has stuck around for this, waiting quite a while. Apparently, I forgot all about Auburn making it the year after Georgia won and also beating Penn State, but it had been a 3-year time frame where only Big Ten schools were appearing in that big game. Looking back at this entire history, we now have 4 teams tied for the most national championships. And there's still 8 years left to see who comes out on top. Boise State better have a good hire lined up for their new head coach, though, because they just lost theirs to Notre Dame. In a surprising move, Paul Bergman is leaving FIU, who just got promoted, to go coach at Marshall, and UMass is losing their head coach to Colorado. There are a lot of coaching changes going on. Apparently, Kenny Dillingham ended up back at Arizona State just to take the job at LSU, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Hawaii losing their head coach as well, though. Are we going to see who Boise State got? How low of a coach is he rated? Turns out he used to be Washington's defensive coordinator. I'm not sure how this hire is going to go for the Broncos, but they'd been having such success. I also noticed Dan Lanning left Oregon. Maybe he went to the NFL or something else a few years ago because they just got rid of Tony White, who's now at Louisville. And seeing a guy like Joey McGuire end up at UTEP could be insane news for the Miners. During this past recruiting cycle, Iowa brought in a top 10 class, so they continue to do really well whenever it comes to recruiting. Inside the top 25, Memphis is going to find themselves there, so they keep on building up. That's a huge deal for them if they're ever going to compete in the SEC. Georgia has taken the best quarterback in the portal, though, who just left Iowa, so there's a hit to the Hawkeyes. And I can't believe I just went by this the first time. Jared Book, who came from USC, who typically puts out incredible quarterbacks, the second best quarterback in the transfer portal, committed to Fresno State. So Fresno State is starting to find more of their footing too. The issue they'll always run into though is unless they get lucky and their entire schedule is just full of conference opponents near the bottom of the Big Ten, they're going to have so many big schools that they're going to have to face every year. So even if they find themselves with a kid that's projected to win the Heisman Trophy at some point, we have seen that not make much of a difference. Like Cal last year had the best quarterback in the country and they still went 6-6. So I'm not expecting much for New Mexico State and Max Harper. At this point, I think you're just guaranteed to go 6-6 if you have a quarterback that could potentially win the Heisman Trophy. Moving up to the Big Ten from the Big 12, getting promotion is going to be Maryland, West Virginia, and Indiana. West Virginia has done it after being in Tier 3. They went 7-5 though, so that tells you the state of the conference this past season. At the top though, Boise State finishing inside the top 5 again. It doesn't matter they got a new head coach. There are 6 teams that could potentially make the playoffs out of the Big Ten. Fresno State goes 8-4. They're not doing too bad themselves. Looks like Iowa and Penn State are going to make sure they avoid relegation again, but Texas Tech is going down. They've won a national championship. Now they're headed down. So is Baylor and Wisconsin. It was that first year Texas Tech won, so it's been over a decade, but still crazy to see. FIU, they're going to get relegated after just getting promoted. Eastern Michigan finally goes down, and Michigan State is headed to a Tier 3 conference. The Spartans also got the worst conference placement for next year that they could have because Conference USA is home to FIU. UConn is going to escape it pretty easily, but this is where the Panthers are headed back to. Then Eastern Michigan is going to have to return to the MAC after starting in the MAC. Colorado State's been stuck here for a while. I think there were 2 Pac-12 teams that dropped down one year, so that's how they got here. And then speaking of the Pac-12, this is the worst case scenario for Michigan State because this conference has a lot of former Power 4 teams that end up getting stuck near the bottom. Either Houston or Kansas is about to escape, but that's where Michigan State will be. That's just how it worked out for the Tier 3 conferences on that side. The SEC also has a chance to put 6 teams into the college football playoff, though I think we should eliminate Florida State. They got 4 losses. They probably aren't in the running. Memphis can't do much better than just finishing inside the top 25 either. Alabama, Texas, Auburn, all going down. This is the craziest of relegation that we have seen. The ACC is going to be brutal next season. I would not want to be a part of this conference, and Georgia Tech, Rice, and Tulane are all getting out at the perfect time. Tulane has bounced back after they were just relegated. This is really good news for those 3 programs. In fact, Rice could win the whole conference. I have to imagine, though, if those are the teams that are somehow winning this thing, 4-way tiebreaker for Tulane to even finish in 3rd place, that the teams at the bottom need to be pretty bad, not Kentucky. Why is Kentucky headed down to a Tier 3 conference? The worst part is it has to be the best one, too. The one that Virginia, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, Stanford haven't been able to get out of. We have to put Kentucky in the American. Seems like Tulsa has put together their 3rd straight good season. But the reason Kentucky has to go to the American is the Sun Belt is going to adopt South Alabama, where they formerly came from. Boston College or Mississippi State about to get out. And then for the Mountain West Conference, this is where I would have wanted Kentucky to be, where Louisville seems to struggle every so often. I just know Arkansas is closer to the Mountain West, so it makes more sense to place them here. For both Michigan State and Kentucky, it could take seasons for these teams to climb out. I've accepted Kentucky is not winning a championship in this experiment. And I think there are 2 conference championships that we have to view. Houston and Kansas have been stuck in this position for a while. There was a moment in this where Kansas signed one of the top transfers at tight end. I think he led them to like a 7-5 season, so we're going to watch that game. We also have to see if Tulsa can get out. If they lose 3 in a row, I think they just have to accept promotion's not meant for them, but we'll see what happens. They're going to be hosting them in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I think at this point, they just got to give it up. They aren't even in a competitive matchup at the moment. They're throwing it deep, hoping for the best, but FAU catches it off of the deflection. And so once again, a whole season has gone to waste for Tulsa, unless they still get a playoff spot. They're ranked 6th. We'll just have to wait and see how far the committee is willing to drop them. And one thing I think I've focused very heavily on is seeing how these group of 6 schools do when they have to integrate with the Power 4 conferences. But what about some of these Power 4 teams that don't typically have the best chance at winning a title? Outside of Oklahoma State, who's got history anyway, we just haven't followed many of those journeys closely. And with a Kansas touchdown tying things all up at 27, 55 seconds left on the clock, we could be seeing overtime. One of these teams needs to be promoted, and it could be Houston there at the 45. Tyler Mendes has now thrown for 300 yards. Both of these schools need to be in a Tier 2 or 1 conference. Without it, they just aren't going to have any chance at winning a title in this video. They're in field goal range. We truly haven't seen much parity, though. All the national championship winners are schools you'd expect. And they have sent out their kicker to just end this one. and beat Kansas. The Pac-12 goes to Houston. I can't remember how long they've spent here. And looking around the country at some of these other results, Jacksonville State is going to win this game 42-14 over UConn, all because Josh Biggums, the kid that won the Heisman Trophy last year, returned for his senior season. He had a couple rushing touchdowns in that game. Louisville is just going to survive once again, so they are out of the Mountain West Conference. We got Ohio taking down Colorado State. And in the last Tier 3 conference, Boston College is going to lose again, this time to Mississippi State. That is going to conclude that this is all the movement we're getting out of what I think is now season 13. And you could say how much of college football has really changed, but I would still argue quite a bit. Nebraska is 100% back. They're getting their Heisman Trophy winner. It's another receiver, which has been a more common position to win the award than quarterback over the last 6 seasons. We also have another playoff bracket that has Boise State as a 5 seed. They've been able to establish themselves really well in the Big Ten once they were able to get to that level of conference. But for them to win 4 in a row and get a national championship still feels a little bit out of reach. Jackson Sankey, leading passer in the country, though Nebraska's quarterback with the most passing touchdowns, least interceptions, I'm wondering why he's not getting more Heisman trophies. I get that Kenyon Doolittle had a really good receiving year, but he didn't have as many receiving touchdowns as some of the last receiving Heisman winners have. And we're seeing a couple of new teams up here on the leading rusher side of things. Delaware with Chuck Hazelwood, but John Smoker was Florida's biggest rusher last year. He was in like the top 5. So I'm not surprised he's been able to carry the Gators to the only undefeated season in college football, and Tulsa just missed out on the playoffs by 1 spot. They've got to be the unluckiest team because they're number 10 in the country. Apparently the Gators were a little bit fraudulent though, because they got beat by Michigan 42-10. Looking at the rest of this playoff picture, Nebraska just escaped Boise State, who keeps on getting better. FAU beat Miami, so they are the better team in the Miami area somehow. I don't know how they won that. USC beat them next. Look at the national championship, though. It's between Michigan, who ever since hiring Jeff Brom from Louisville has been very consistent, while Louisville has struggled, and then Clemson, another team that's been able to win 1 championship in this video, just like Michigan, but no more than that. It is SEC versus Big Ten again because Clemson is a part of the SEC. And this one has gone to overtime, so either one of these teams could take it. Clemson is going to start with the ball. They got Nate Kong at quarterback. He just hands this one off for the first, but they didn't give it to Dalvin Stick. I'm imagining a QB sneak is coming here just to make sure they move the chains. Michigan could have stuffed that run, though they didn't. Not keeping it on the ground this time was a mistake. Josh Cloud with the sack. Michigan has been really consistent in getting back to this game. They're emerging as the team that could win the most national championships in this video, especially for knocking that out. All they're going to have to do is score a touchdown on their drive, assuming this kick stays in, which it does. And they've not ended up in this position on accident. Typically, they sign one of the top classes. But they have now run it 2 times in a row for no gain at all, so it's 3rd and 10. They might get held to 3 as well, unless quarterback makes a big play on the run. He had to ditch it. Clemson has tried to ice the Wolverines kicker, but ultimately, that looked like it was going to be good. And it was, of course. You got him with the play action on the run. You can't complete it, though. So Michigan could go back to the ground. I wouldn't advise with it just because of how bad the run was for them in OT. Their quarterback, Stephen Lamb, has thrown 2 picks, though. And eventually, the run is going to open back up, but there is a flag on the play, and it is holding. Calls like this change everything. Instead of a touchdown, Michigan is going to have to average 18 yards on 3 plays, and they're not going to want to run the football. I can't believe they already got 15 back. Clemson should have known that that was coming. It's going to be marked at the 1. But this is what Michigan needed to do anyway. If they did this on the last drive, the game would be over. For their 2-point conversion, it seems like they're actually going to throw it. It's going to be a jump ball, and they knocked it out. Of all the play calls you could have down in that spot, I really don't like it. It's a big gamble unless they got a really big receiver that they typically can trust. He wasn't able to catch that one. So we got Clemson trying to get the SEC another national championship here. You got to hustle there. When that ball is just in the air, could have intercepted it, but instead they stood around. And now it's looking like the Tigers are about to score that touchdown, potentially getting a 2-point conversion too, and winning the championship. Here we go. Could be a walk-off touchdown. They've come out in the same formation that Michigan did, though. Are they throwing up a jump ball? No. They're handing it off, and it's not there. Dalvin Stick with the game on the line wasn't clutch. I can't imagine that they give him another carry, but they do. What are they thinking? This is the perfect setup for the Wolverines now. 2-point conversion wins the game. If you scramble, you are in. They can't chase him down in time. And that is how Michigan is going to get their 2nd national championship. Jeff Brom is going to be there for a while. It was going to be pretty funny if right after I said that, I jinxed it and we saw him here in the staff moves. Tulsa just lost Mike Norvell, though, to Alabama, and that has been the reason that they've been so good. We might see Tulsa start to struggle again. They couldn't ever win promotion. We're also going to see Marcus Freeman go from Penn State to West Virginia. Dabo Swinney in his second appearance at Alabama, who just got relegated, he is now landed at Illinois. And Dan Lanning didn't go to the NFL. No, he went to Oklahoma, where he got fired, so he took the Texas job just despite them, but he's got work to do. Texas got relegated like Alabama. Who a team like Tulsa hires is going to be a really big deal, whether or not they're able to continue having success, and it's David Yost from Arkansas State. I don't think we've seen Arkansas State do too much in this. And lastly, Mark Stoops ending up at Kent State. I'm not going to hate on him. He had good years at Kentucky. He can easily have success with Kent State there. It was just time for the inevitable split. Alabama still signing some of the top classes, though, despite really struggling and being relegated. That has not affected them too much. But Fresno State, only signing 19 prospects, just got a top 25 class. They have a 5-star in here. They have 10 4-stars. This is what happens whenever you stay in a top conference for a while. In fact, they picked up the number 5 player in the country, Stephen Plummer, out of California. I'm hoping that he gets on the field immediately for them, though they also have a 4-star transfer sophomore that'll probably play first. And that'll lead to the 5-star transferring. Tulsa with the top 25 class as well, so Mike Norvell tried to send them out well before he left the program. Memphis and Boise State nearing the top 25, Rice at 32. Those are all the smaller schools that we have seen have success. Their recruiting classes are finally starting to reflect it. For some of these top transfers, I don't see any of their names here until Memphis is on this right guard. And Fresno State picked up the best left guard in the country, so there is that. Roderick Montgomery was one of the top quarterback signings. I mean, they're becoming a good destination to land at. I can't believe Stanford still is, since they've been stuck in Tier 3 forever. As some of these team prestiges continue to raise, that is the only thing giving them a shot at still signing some good classes. We're seeing Tulsa and Memphis both up to 3.5 stars, which is a lot for some of these programs. Boise State, also inside the top 10 preseason rankings, has 4 out of 5 stars. That might be the highest that I've seen the Broncos climb in any video I've ever done. Inevitably, though, Boise State was due to have a down year. They've been losing their head coach season after season. They go 7-5. They don't even go above 500 in conference play, so I'm sure their prestige is going to tick down. But Fresno State almost made the playoff. Now, they are just on the outside. I don't think they have any hope of getting in. They beat Boise State this season, though. It was a great year for them. For TCU, Utah, and Maryland, though, not so great of a season. They're all getting demoted. And they'll be replaced by Baylor, San Diego State, and Arizona State. So there's another group of 6 team that has snuck their way into the Big Ten. For some of these programs breaking off to be in the new Pac-12, with more resources the second they get up to the Big 12, they have been thriving so far, at least on this college football video game. Ohio, New Mexico State, and UMass, though, are not. They have all been relegated. And that is really unfortunate for the Aggies, because at one point it seemed like they were getting momentum, and 2, they could go back to Conference USA, their original conference, but I've decided to put them in the Pac-12. It just makes more geographical sense. Michigan State might get out. And then I'm going to put UMass in Conference USA instead of back to the MAC, just because they're going to be near programs like UConn, like Delaware. I think they're going to fit in well here. While the third team demoted from the Big 12, Ohio, is headed back to the MAC conference, that Northwestern might finally escape this season. So far, for all 3 of those conference championship games, I have almost no interest, so hopefully some of the other ones for promotion are a little bit more interesting. Rice finishes 7-5, 6th place in the conference. But here are some ones that are going to sting. Tulane building up momentum, they went 5-7. Memphis, who had been getting a lot of momentum recently, they went 4-8. They're going to be sent down alongside Syracuse and Florida to the ACC. That is probably going to cause them to lose a lot of the recruits that they just brought in. And I can't believe I've seen the day. I was making fun of Louisville all this time, but they're actually about to be promoted to the SEC alongside Auburn and Missouri for next season, while Texas A&M and Texas just missed out. Where's Alabama? They're down here mid-table. Then you have UTEP just finishing above 500. Hawaii also avoided relegation because USF took a spot. Vanderbilt headed back down alongside Marshall too. And somehow the team closest to the Mountain West is going to be Vanderbilt, so they're going to be joining this conference next season. That is pretty bad. Arkansas fell here. I think that was last season. Here in the Sun Belt, Boston College up to a top 25 team in the country, but they have gotten shafted on the 3-way tiebreaker. They're not going to have a chance to win promotion. Then you have the American Conference. I guess Tulsa losing their head coach didn't affect their program at all. They went undefeated in conference play. Kentucky could ruin their hopes of getting out, though. That would be 4 conference championship losses in a row. As a Kentucky fan, though, you know exactly what I'm going to be rooting for. That is the conference championship game during this week that makes the most sense to spectate. And I just don't want to see my Wildcats sitting here struggling in a Tier 3 conference. I actually have a decent amount of faith for them to to come out on top of this one just based off of the way Tulsa's played. But turns out this just had to be the year that the Golden Hurricane are able to actually win the conference championship. You're not going to come back from being down 17 with no time left. And in other news, we have teams like Northwestern that beat Western Michigan 52-3, so they are finally out. App State also annihilated Troy, who was ranked, while Nevada beat Wake Forest, preventing them from getting promoted from the Mountain West Conference. Michigan State beats Arizona, so they are immediately back up to Tier 2, and Delaware falls 6 points short with Sam Houston. We'll see if the Bearcats can stay up in the Big 12 next year. I just have a feeling they're immediately coming back down. And for our Heisman Trophy winner this year, it's back-to-back Nebraska wide receivers. I'm sure that they're inside the playoff. Not only are they in the playoff, but they are also undefeated, the #1 team. Tulsa did finally get their opportunity to get in here. San Diego State also won the Big 12. They literally beat Arizona State to get here, but they've been ranked one spot below them in the polls, so now they have to play them back-to-back, and they have to go on the road. All of that playoff stuff might be for nothing, though, if Nebraska's truly as good as they seem to be. I mean, Marlin has led the country back-to-back years in passing yards. This time he had 52 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, and 2 of the top 5 receivers in the country came from the Cornhuskers. You're going to see Nevada's names pop up a good bit, though. They had a lot of passing yards and receiving yards. Anthony Sandridge, best receiver. So Auburn's starting to have a little bit of success again. Florida State's running back led the country in rushing touchdowns. App State still putting some players up here. And just looking at this entire playoff picture, a couple really good results for former G6 schools. Again, Tulsa is able to beat Missouri, but then they got flattened by Georgia. Same thing happened to San Diego State. They take down Arizona State for the 2nd week in a row, but then Nebraska annihilates them. And the Cornhuskers are back in the national championship. They got a 99 overall team. They got Mike Bobo as their head coach. That hire has made a lot of sense for them, and averaging 47 points per game, having a roster on paper that's this much better than Florida State's, I'm not sure the Seminoles stand a chance. Now, Florida State is representing the SEC. I got to take the Big Ten side, though, just based off of history. But it might not go that way. Florida State currently has the ball, and they're getting the first down. They've reached field goal range. They're trailing by 3. And Trayvon Major just hands this off because I don't think Nebraska was expecting the run. It was a nice pickup, but they're about to waste it down by just spiking the ball after taking some time. So you might as well just run a play at that point. Jet touch pass, 3rd and 2. The Seminoles are able to convert, and it's time for Trayvon Major to start taking some shots down the field. What you don't want is an interception, so you still need to play it a little bit safe. But you don't want overtime against Nebraska either. You want to end this game now. Though they are not going to do that. The rain's coming down heavy. They want to play it safe, so they're going to kick a field goal and head to OT. Nebraska's not going to risk trying to get to field goal range in 15 seconds. You don't know what could happen. You could throw a pick. You could slip and fumble. So we keep on getting instant classics in the championship. Couldn't be better than this. Is Nebraska just going to run the football here, though? Because we know during the regular season, they've been so effective through the air. I'm imagining that they're about to throw it, but you can scramble to. With an offense as talented as the Cornhuskers, there's always going to be something that Florida State's given up. The halfback draw catches them off guard a bit. And on 2nd and goal, through the air, tight end only gets 1. That makes it 3rd and goal. Seems like Nebraska might be settling for a field goal. They are now. So they're going to be able to hit this kick, but Florida State wins with the touchdown. I feel like every time we see teams in that situation, though, they just don't take advantage of it. So are the Seminoles going to break that streak? Looks like this run won't get too far, but it could have been way worse until Timmy Atkins turned it into a few. They trusted him on 3rd and 3. Just 13 more yards, and Florida State's going to win it all, but Nebraska gets an interception, and they're going to rub it in with a pick 6. That is not the time to turn it over. Nebraska gets their 2nd national championship of this video. Just a brutal way for Florida State to lose that one. I'm starting to see a little bit of a pattern emerge with the national championship winners. It goes Michigan, Nebraska, Georgia, Michigan, Nebraska, Georgia. I think we can expect the Bulldogs to win it next year. Look at the 16-0 seasons, though, from these programs. It's the only 2 that we have seen. They've been very rare with promotion and relegation. San Diego State just lost Kalani Sitake, though, to Oklahoma State. They just lost the reason that they have been good. And at the same time, they're going to poach Tulsa's offensive coordinator. Not as great of a snag. Rice loses their head coach to LSU. So all of these programs that are trying their hardest to come up eventually just lose their head coach anyway. And Kenny Dillingham did not last long at LSU. He has now been fired to coach at UMass, so he'll probably turn them around even better. Looks like Arizona State's offensive coordinator got poached by Rice for the head coach job. But Steve Wheeler is one of the favorite coordinators I ever signed because he is a talent developer. If he's there in a rebuild, I will take him. I don't see Army firing their head coach on here and showing that he got hired at Tulsa, mainly because I've been taking over Army to look at all the simulation stuff. But that's what happened apparently. David Yost has gone from coaching Army to now being Tulsa's new head coach, even though he wasn't having much success when he was at Army. But that's what happened apparently, except I just figured out what really happened. We became the offensive coordinator after losing our head coach job here, and Matt Drinkle is still a level 53 head coach. You pair that with David Yost, who is a full-on tactician, Tulsa's going to be a scary team to play. One thing all those small schools have to keep on doing, though, is signing good classes, or else they stand no chance at replicating their success. West Virginia, by the way, got 3 5-stars. They had the 6th best class in the country, so we could see them starting to turn things around. And the farther we go down, we're finally going to pick up on Fresno State. They're inside the top 25. Rice is at number 29, but for the rest of those schools, they definitely fell off again. I say that, though, and then I go look at the Big Ten recruiting class rankings, and San Diego State is sitting at number 7 in the conference at 48th. So once you get to the Big 12, you don't recruit very well. And the best thing Boise State did this season was sign 2 4-star 5'9" running backs. I don't think they reloaded very well, unless Zach Johns comes in and he's just a monster. It unfortunately seems like they're starting to slip up a little bit, just like Tulane has with one of the worst classes in the country. They only signed 4 players. The SEC has been elevating further and further too. Now they're starting to put together more top classes. Still not many of the top 12. Almost all those spots belong to the Big Ten, and I'm tracking all of this for a reason. These type of shifts have definitely affected who is good and who's not in the future. Number 1 player, only 5-star in the portal out of Ohio State. Their quarterback has decided to go to Miami, but San Diego State continues to elevate their name. They're picking up a top 10 signing at free safety. You like to see that. And I've just gotten curious what some of these rosters are starting to look like for these smaller schools that have elevated. Roderick Montgomery has stayed at Fresno State. He's a 93 overall. This could be their best season. Meanwhile, unlike a Boise State, we can see why they actually took a step back last year, because they aren't as good as they have been. Another sleeper team to watch for could be Iowa State too. Juan Coffey is a 96 overall senior quarterback for them, and they're starting off just inside the top 25 from the Big 12. Virginia Tech also inside the top 25 out of the American Conference, so I'd imagine they're going to probably win that and escape it for the first time in like a decade. Sure enough, my prediction was spot on. They went undefeated. They're the number 6 team in the country, but if they don't beat USF, who made the conference championship game over Kentucky, then they still won't be promoted. And that would just get them up to the Tier 2 conference ACC. It wouldn't get them to the SEC yet. The top dog on this side of the pyramid, Missouri finishing inside the top 25, Rice at 8-4, they're still doing pretty well. But Tulane did not do very well. They are getting relegated down to the ACC alongside Louisville and Ole Miss. Notre Dame was about to get relegated, so was Tennessee, but Ole Miss had that tiebreaker. And for the teams replacing them, Tulsa's got all sorts of momentum. This is back-to-back promotions for them. Meanwhile, Memphis is also moving straight back up. You have Texas, who's going back to the SEC. But there was a 4-way tiebreaker that Texas A&M and Florida are not going to be happy about, because they're having to stay down. Alabama staying down. Mississippi State staying down. This is a tough conference to come out on top of. It really all depends on which teams you have to actually play on your schedule. UTEP's going to survive another season. App State does too, as a 3-9 team, but South Carolina had a tough conference schedule, so they're getting relegated with Hawaii and Pittsburgh. And I cannot stress enough how wild it is. Pittsburgh's fallen all the way down to the American in the Tier 3 conference next year, because they were very competitive for a good portion of this. Things always change super fast, though. Either Arkansas or Wake Forest is about to get out of the Mountain West, which Hawaii is headed back to. Wake Forest has been trying. And for South Carolina, they're going to be in the Sun Belt that South Alabama, another undefeated team in this country, might be able to get out of. Over in the Big Ten, we'll run into the third and final 12-0 team, Nebraska. They are just a different animal at the moment. Though Fresno State, number 12 in the country. How is Fresno State able to compete with some of these teams? I know we pointed out that they had one of the best quarterbacks in the country, but that's about it. West Virginia's top 6 class is not doing anything for them so far. Boise State, 6-6. Not being relegated, because that's going to go to Baylor, Indiana, and Cincinnati. But also, they are no longer progressing. Minnesota is the number 13 team in the country with only 1 loss, is going to win the Big 12. They're headed up alongside Iowa State and Texas Tech. Those teams moving up have been pretty typical. This whole Tier 2 conference doesn't feel very good at all. Northwestern escapes the MAC, and then they're like, no, we want to head back there. They've been relegated alongside Sam Houston, which I think I predicted, and Purdue. I really think for all the teams that make it up through Conference USA, then get sent back a year later, like Sam Houston's about to be, it's just very hard to sustain it ever. Even UConn is now going 5-7. There was a moment that they were having success too. Purdue is going to be headed to the MAC Conference. The Eastern Michigan, a team that has found a little bit of success, especially for their size, will be escaping if they beat Western Michigan. And we'll place Northwestern in the Pac-12. The Arizona and Kansas are battling it out for promotion. New Mexico State 8-4. I think they just got relegated. They were trying to get out. They're most likely going to be stuck after this. When we just look at this top conferences list, this affects recruiting a lot, and you don't want to be stuck in any of those Tier 6 conferences besides maybe the American. even the MAC is starting to build up a decent amount of prestige. The teams that have had sustained success, like Tulsa and Memphis, both came from the American. Boise State, they came from the Pac-12. I think these California schools that are also doing well came from the Pac-12. So that lines up. Ideally, you come from a conference with at least the middle ground of conference prestige so you can keep building from there. Looking at all these conference championship games, though, I think we're just going to watch Virginia Tech and USF. The Hokies have an opportunity here to go 13-0. They actually got their head coach, or maybe he was a coordinator at Tulane. Either way, they pulled their coach from Tulane. He's got Tulane roots. And with where these two programs are trending, in the last few years, I would have wanted to be at Tulane, but now that they've been relegated, Virginia Tech could get promoted here with a win. You would much rather be a part of the Hokies, especially when they got traditions like that. Bad news for Virginia Tech, though. If they give up 78 yards in the final minute, then they're going to lose. Tyree Lopez just got real lucky with that throw. He was under pressure and could have thrown it away, but instead he made the crossbody read, and it worked out for them. Now they're approaching midfield, no timeout. So every time they get a play like that, they're most likely just going to run up and spike the football. But this has got to be scary for Virginia Tech. They might fall out of their playoff spot. We have seen that happen to other American Conference teams with losses in this game. Tulsa specifically, and they wouldn't be promoted either. On 2nd and 10, they're going to give a run open. It's a flag. It is a flag. He just stepped a little bit past the line of scrimmage. You can't do that. And it was a great decision to stunt to the outside, so he felt like he could just run it, knowing they don't have timeouts. Defensive tackle gets in the pressure. It's loose, and Virginia Tech recovers. The Hokies have finally gotten out of the American Conference. They are headed to the college football playoff, and we have to see which teams will be joining them. Minnesota beats Maryland by 21 points. This was the Big 12 championship, but Minnesota might be back. They're going to be headed to the Big 10. Arkansas annihilated Wake Forest. Poor Wake Forest cannot get out of the Mountain West Conference. In the Pac-12 championship, Kansas is going to beat Arizona by 3. We have UMass taking down Kennesaw State by 4. Eastern Michigan loses by 21 to Western Michigan. And then South Alabama remains undefeated, but they're ranked 19th in the country, so they're not going to get their opportunity at playing for the playoff. We'll take a look at that playoff picture in a second. Just want to make sure you can see every team that's getting promoted or relegated. And I can't believe it. Tulsa has gotten themselves a first-round bye in the playoff despite losing to Memphis in the conference championship game. Virginia Tech is the 3 seed, so they also have a first-round bye from a Tier 3 conference. But as crazy as that playoff picture already seems, because things are really starting to shake up, it took like going 15 years in the future, Fresno State is just on the outside. They are the highest ranked 9-3 team, so they are being respected. It's just when you lose to Nebraska, Michigan, and Ohio State, it hurts to be left out because clearly all 3 of those teams are very good. With how good of a year they had, I thought for sure their quarterback would stay on the Heisman Trophy watch, but he isn't here. In fact, the Heisman Trophy went to a Georgia wide receiver, almost went to another Nebraska receiver. But in reality, if it went to anyone other than Ofisa Mapu, it would have made 0 sense because he had the most receptions, tied for it in the country, easily the most yards, the most receiving touchdowns. And on South Alabama's side of things, I hope that Deacon Mays returns for them for his senior year because he was the leading rusher. That is how they were able to go undefeated. He's a 90 overall though, so he'll probably declare or he could transfer. AJ Randall out of Georgia Tech was the leading passer in the country. Nebraska always has a kid up here. I'm surprised that USC doesn't. I just realized that they've also missed out on the playoffs this year because they lost to Nebraska, Oregon, and Arizona State. Yeah, a couple of those were avoidable. Oregon hasn't been good for about 5 years now, and there's no way that the national championship ends up being Nebraska and Georgia. Of all the chaos that just went on in this bracket, Minnesota beat Ohio State, then Tulsa took them down to get to the semifinal. You have Memphis beating Miami before they lost to Nebraska. Nebraska had the easiest pathway possible. They are undefeated again. But Georgia has also made their way here. Virginia Tech got a surprise win over Michigan. Georgia had to win 3 games. And I just realized either Nebraska is about to win their 32nd straight game or Georgia is going to continue the pattern of national champions. We were so close to getting to hop into a national championship game with one of the most random teams you could have guessed before the season started. Virginia Tech or Tulsa was so close. And with Tulsa getting promoted to the SEC, that was probably their best chance of that ever happening because their schedule is about to get so much more difficult. For Nebraska, at least in this game, things aren't looking great. Lamar Singletary, their quarterback, has thrown 4 interceptions, but they still have an opportunity to win somehow. He is going to take off and get them the first down. And I can't believe Kirby Smart's team has not been able to put the Cornhuskers away with how well they have played defensively. He still has a minute to get like 23 yards. This is not something that is hard for Nebraska to achieve. The only reason it's a challenge is because he struggled in this game. And I really, really do not like this decision to spike the ball. I understand they have no timeouts. They've been in a rush. They wanted to get a little break, a little breather. But now you have 1 less down to convert. Doesn't matter if you catch it anyway. He's trying to reach for it. And an injury timeout will stop the clock. That is a major deal. Georgia has 40 seconds left if Nebraska gets in to score a field goal. And here we go, all coming down to this. First play for the Bulldogs. Clean pocket, plenty of time to get it out, but receivers not catching the ball. I can't believe this is an issue Georgia's still dealing with in 2040. This is the 2040 national championship. I think I just realized how far we are in the future. We still have like another 5 seasons to of this experiment. This video has taken a very long time, but I've been entertained. I've been so invested in how some of these teams do, and you can't give that up. Approaching midfield, Bulldogs sling it over the middle, and it's caught. So they can use their final timeout. Do they have a kicker that can hit from this distance? If they do, the title is theirs. And they have ended what would have been a very scary run if Nebraska had back-to-back undefeated seasons. I can't believe they pulled it off. I really can't believe they pulled it off. Coming into this playoff, they were a 10 seed. They win 4 straight. Final play, just chucking it down the field. You never know what is going to happen there. If that like stumbles into someone's hands and they take off, it's happened one time. It happened in one video, and I just wait for it to happen again. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen. I will never forget it. The pattern is complete, though. You got Michigan, Nebraska, Georgia, Michigan, Nebraska, Georgia. I guess Michigan's winning it all this next season. Luke Fickell, though, taking the job at Pittsburgh after Minnesota just got promoted back to the Big Ten. Why would you go to Pittsburgh? They literally just got relegated to the American, but I guess that's where teams have been building up momentum to go on these runs. John Sumrall ended up back at Florida just to take the Alabama job. These coaches are bouncing around so much. Mike Norvell from Alabama to Colorado. And Memphis has gotten to the point somehow where their defensive coordinators are getting hired at schools like Indiana. What a flip. I think that's about the farthest that some of these schools are ever going to ascend, where they're just giving away their coordinators to Power 4 programs, but their recruiting classes are never going to stack up as high as some of these other teams. Like Tulsa's just inside the top 25. I'm sure Memphis is maybe inside the top 40, but they were down here inside the top 50. I mean, they're barely making it there. Even Eastern Michigan can do that. And I just learned you can also search by high school recruits or transfers. I don't know how I've never noticed that as a feature, but these are the top transfer classes. Rice is in at number 14 with 12 3-stars, so that is how they've been replacing their talent and still staying competitive. But either way, I was still far more impressed with the transfer class Tulsa just threw together. Could Carlos Coco be the future for them? He's not as highly touted of a transfer as some of these players, where Duke has been able to sign 3 of the top 6 guys. Ohio State is going to get the top 2. One of them just returned back, but I'm sure he'll still be a good quarterback. San Diego State picks up a 4-star transfer in David Cumberland. The rest of these signees are all to big Power 4 programs. And as I'm arranging the SEC for next season, Memphis, Tulsa, and Rice are going to be fighting for their lives because there's almost no weak spots here. I can understand a little bit more how teams like Fresno State, Boise State, San Diego State have been able to stay up in the Big Ten because there are teams on the schedule that they're better overalls than. But the SEC has returned to being very deep with 11 of the top 25 teams in the country. There's only 16 teams in their conference, so 11 of the 16 teams in that conference being ranked in the top 25. Well, at the top of the SEC, we're seeing a lot of the typical teams that we would, though Auburn being here, we know that they've been relegated at points, so they have been able to bounce back. But Rice, Tulsa, Tennessee, Memphis are all at the bottom of the SEC. Tulsa and Rice are both 86 overall teams. It looks like Tulsa is going to be relegated with these two. Rice just avoided it, but I almost think that's what you want. They've been able to build and still haven't achieved almost anything compared to some of these bigger programs in that time frame. You have Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M all earning promotion to the SEC next year. So it feels like the SEC is on a comeback. They've gotten rid of most of their bottom feeder teams to these lower tiers now. Tulane almost got relegated down to tier 3, though. What has happened to the green wave with this fall off? It's going to be App State, California, that's a new one, and Nevada all relegated instead. But that was a close call for the green wave. I don't think Cal is going to be too happy in their new conference. USF not making the conference championship despite being the number 17 team in the country. North Carolina and Kentucky, I don't think they're escaping here. Virginia was at the bottom at 2-10. Hawaii trying to get out of the conference again, where Nevada comes back in. Those two teams have been up and down so many times. Just can't find their footing, and App State will be back in the Sun Belt, where Troy or Louisiana Tech will take their spot in the ACC. Over in the Big Ten, of course, USC, Michigan, Nebraska all having good seasons. They've built up so much momentum by now. Ohio State has actually struggled a good bit. And even West Virginia, who had a couple really solid classes, can only get to 8-4. Fresno State at 7-5. They also have a good track record. San Diego State 7-5. Like, these teams are starting to really run into some tough schedules. Boise State at 2-10 is getting relegated, with Iowa State and Minnesota, who just made the playoff. Meanwhile, Maryland's headed back to the Big Ten. They have been up and down so many times. Houston, who has crawled from Tier 3, is eventually getting up to the Big Ten too. Utah was there at one point. I'm not sure when they fell out, but they are going to be back. And at the bottom of this conference, Colorado falling all the way down to some Tier 3 one. UMass also just couldn't get a good footing. Kansas 2-10 after winning their conference. And the only takeaway I can have for a team like Kansas is they've been greatly affected by spending most of their time in a Tier 3 conference. As you could see there, I've decided we're going to put them in Conference USA. UCF, they've also spent so much time down here. They are still a 1-star team prestige. Then you have the MAC Conference. Purdue's been in for a little bit. UMass will be replacing one of these two teams. With Colorado headed back to the Pac-12, one of the two teams from the Pac-2, Oregon State and Washington State, will get promoted this year. It was a really bad year for seeing any underdog storylines. The big teams have just dominated once again, though UTSA could get their first promotion. Pittsburgh might be able to survive getting relegated. Something has to give, and Luke Fickell came here to turn the Panthers around. He saw a 3-9 team and decided to leave Minnesota for this. Clearly, he was able to see into the future where Minnesota was just going to get relegated because their roster could not compete. And finally, we get a snow game to watch. It takes a long time to discover these in Dynasty. I am so glad whenever we get one, though. What I would really like next year is if EA just allowed us to select the weather before the game, because I'd make a lot of my games snow games. And I guess Luke Fickell made the wrong decision choosing the Panthers over staying at Minnesota, because his team is not getting promoted this year. In fact, they're fumbling the ball away on the final play. And the UTSA defense held very strong, keeping them at just 7 points. Other teams that are going to get promoted include Kennesaw State, who beat Liberty by 30, Washington State, who annihilated Oregon State, Hawaii, who took down Vanderbilt by 3, Miami, Ohio, who just beat Buffalo and earned themselves a playoff spot, and then Louisiana Tech, who beat Troy. What are the Rainbow Warriors going to do with this promotion, though? Are they just going to be headed back down another season later? That's what we've been seeing a lot of. Michigan's running back wins the Heisman Trophy. You couldn't tell from that picture, but he led the country in rushing touchdowns. Despite being 4th in yards, Utah was leading that. And Marshall had the #1 receiver in the country. That's going to be a kid that a lot of big schools are probably going to go after if he transfers. As for the leading passer, it's actually Nick King for Ole Miss. It's not going to be Frederick Whitehart, who is now a senior at USC. I feel like he has been there for a while. Though he was not able to get them to the national championship game, they lost to Nebraska in the semifinals. We got a Nebraska-Georgia rematch. Last year, it was the Bulldogs that came out on top, ending Nebraska's undefeated 2-year run. They're looking to win back-to-back titles. Kirby's done this before. And this would put Georgia well in the lead over every other school for the most national championships in this video. Now, I can pretty safely assume the Cornhuskers are about to score here. Though if they threw a pick on the goal line, it would have been neat to see. And what this does is it gives Georgia a minute to march down the field, kick a field goal, send things to OT. They have been here before. I'm not sure they're going to even feel the pressure. They're confident enough to run. But Nebraska stuffed it out. They're going to be ready for another run, which they're on. So Georgia is going to have to go through the air. You can't keep things on the ground forever, and that's fine. Isofa Cram literally has over 350 passing yards, but it's this offensive line that just gets shredded. And that's the only reason Georgia's offense has even been stopped in this game. It has been an offensive shootout for these teams. You got to get the throws out very quick. Fromm on 3rd and 8 is going to send his tight end into motion. He heads back to that side of the field. Little bit of a play action fake, and that should have been picked. But Nebraska doesn't hang on to the ball. Is this where their defense actually clutches up? They do. With no timeouts left, they can take a knee. And so that's going to be another national championship for the Cornhuskers. This now means that we have reached year 16 in this whole experiment, and the teams that are tied for the most national championships are Georgia with 3 and Nebraska with 3. There's only 4 years left now, and Boise State just made a really good hire in Jeff Lebby. He has been Ole Miss's head coach. The fact that he chose them over the Rebels says a lot. But I still don't think any of those programs are going to be able to make a deep run, because when you got a coach like UTSA's that just got them promoted, then Minnesota comes in, they poach him, and we're now deep into some of these guys' coaching careers. Matt Campbell is at Rutgers. He's now at Notre Dame. Memphis just had to fire their head coach because they couldn't take the losing for any longer. I'm looking to see any other names like Mike Norvell going to South Alabama, or you see Elijah Drinkwitz going to Kansas State. And of all the teams that we've been tracking closely that have made the jump, they've maintained their success, you're going to see like none of them inside the top 50 recruiting classes besides Fresno State. They still got 11 4-stars. So they are doing their best. We're going to see what they can come up with this year. But I am now accepting that if a smaller Power 4 program doesn't win a national championship, we are going to see absolutely zero parity over this 20-year time frame. The number one quarterback wanted to leave Texas A&M, then he decided to stay. Just call that a Washington-type situation. And I'm sure Nebraska and Georgia are going to find themselves having another great shot at winning the national championship. Alabama putting themselves into the picture, though, as a top 10 team is something we have not seen out of the Crimson Tide. Houston at number 14, that's another one to take note of. And for my final prediction before simming season 17, with a conference like this one, I don't see how Rice even stays above 500. As good as they've been, this is probably the year they get relegated. I might need to issue an apology to them, though, because they came in at 7-5. Did they go 4-5 in conference play? Yes, but they did not get relegated like Florida State did, like Missouri did, like Georgia Tech just did. So they are somehow having more success than those programs. 3 ACC teams are moving up to the SEC too. We got Syracuse, NC State, Virginia Tech, all at the top of the conference. It's not like UTEP or Memphis was that bad either. I think UTEP has stayed in the ACC ever since they came up like 5-10 years ago. So that has been impressive on that alone. Tulane 6-6, FAU, SMU, UTSA all relegated. We might as well throw the Owls in the Sun Belt. They're as close as we're going to get to it. Marshall trying to get out of the conference again. And for UTSA, we'll place them in the Mountain West Conference, even though there's not many mountains in San Antonio, at least that I'm aware with. I've never been to San Antonio. I don't know what's going on there. SMU will go back to the American, which is where they originally joined the ACC from. Kentucky seems like they could finally break free, but California is undefeated. That is a huge promotion game we will most likely be watching. Nebraska and Michigan continue to stay at the top of the sport. USC is just going to be on the outside of the playoff. Ohio State might be too. And Fresno State's got to be proud that they're still able to stay above 500. Even if they're not competing for Big Ten titles, they're having decent success. While programs like Oklahoma State, Texas Tech that have been really solid in this video are getting relegated, Washington too. To take their spot, Washington State was so close, but they just didn't have this 5-way tiebreaker. Illinois back in the Big Ten for like the 5th time. Baylor and TCU, same thing. 2 of those teams will probably be relegated like a season later. Michigan State, they're going back to a tier 3 conference, by the way, with Western Michigan and Jacksonville State. Michigan State can play in the Pac-12 again. Colorado and Arizona will be in that conference championship. Western Michigan to the MAC, where Purdue is on the verge of a playoff spot. All they have to do is beat Toledo in this conference championship game. And Jacksonville State to Conference USA. UCF, it took them like a decade, but they have finally put together a solid season here. So they could also be escaping, but I've already decided. We have to see if either Kentucky or California can get out of the American. Kentucky trying to spoil an undefeated season for the Golden Bears. And a playoff spot as well. That is another thing that is currently on the line. I was really hoping Kentucky would at least get one run at a playoff berth. But how can that happen when they're doubling the score against us? It was even worse than that before we scored a touchdown at the very end. But I kind of expected that anyway. How is Nebraska getting so many Heisman Trophy winners? They have been elite. Clark Garfield, coming off of a national championship win, decided to throw for the most passing yards in the country, only turned it over 4 times with 43 touchdowns. And he also let Zach Eaton eat by just forcing him the football over and over. TCU at a top receiver. Auburn has been another team that's been up here. But I'm noticing more and more these statistics leaders don't matter too much because it doesn't affect how good these teams actually are. Sometimes these players are just forced to carry a bigger load, all to go 6-6. For the Conference USA Championship, UCF beat Connecticut. And then we had Purdue taking down Toledo in the MAC for a promotion spot, Wyoming beating Northern Illinois in the Mountain West. I still don't understand why NIU joined the Mountain West in the first place. Colorado beating Arizona by 3, and Marshall losing to Southern Mississippi. The biggest notes out of all of that are the fact that Purdue and UCF were finally able to get promoted again. And I gotta say, the committee did all of Nebraska, Cal, and Purdue dirty because they took the 3 teams undefeated going into the playoff and put them in the same small section of the bracket. Nebraska came out on top of all of it, making it to the Natty. And they literally seem unstoppable right now. They've been able to win 3 of the last 6 national championships, and their offense is so much better than Penn State's. I would be shocked if the Nittany Lions were even able to keep this game a little bit competitive. And sure enough, on the final play of the game, Penn State is down by 17 points. So this touchdown doesn't matter. They just scored there to feel a little bit better about themselves. Nebraska wins back-to-back titles. So 17 seasons deep into this experiment, only a few years left. They are in the lead over Georgia with 4 national championships to 3. It's all happened so fast. And the Heisman trophies have come with it, but Clark Garfield is headed to the NFL early, so he won't be back for another season. Apparently, Kentucky can't even keep around Alex Grinch either as our head coach. He wants to go to Michigan State. UTEP loses their coach to Arkansas. I don't think Joey McGuire was really doing that much anymore, though. Kalen DeBoer was at Arkansas before he took the Florida job. And Kenny Dillingham got fired at UMass. It is hard to get fired at UMass, but he has stumbled to Boston Boston College, their rival. Now would be the time for any team hoping to shock the college football world in these last few seasons of the experiment to put together a really good class, keep them around, and develop them. Illinois got a top 10 class, so maybe we see them doing something. Oklahoma State hasn't been able to finish off a run yet. And there's been talent mixed in on schools like Iowa, West Virginia, but not enough to ever make a difference. Even at Memphis, we haven't seen them take up that next step once they get to the Tier 1 conference. But that's because it's a very hard jump to make. Schools like Georgia are able to take a quarterback from USF, give him a lot more money, and then have the #1 quarterback in the country headed into next season. This is where Georgia could get more natties. If this video's done anything, I think it shows what the future of college football is really going to look like, with all the power concentrated at the very top. Maybe we'll see Kentucky or Oklahoma State have a solid season with a potential Heisman winning quarterback, but even that's not a guarantee, despite having some easier schedules for those programs. It is actually some weird curse that doesn't make any sense at all. Kentucky goes 6-6 with our 97 overall quarterback, while Navy and North Texas are in the American Championship for a shot at promotion. Just want to point that out before we go over to the SEC and see how these schools did. Miami and Ole Miss might be the only two teams from this conference actually making it to the playoff. Rice went 2-10. It was inevitable. I mean, Virginia Tech also struggled greatly here. California with a great run, though, from Tier 3 all the way up to getting promoted this next season. They will be moving on to the SEC with Mississippi State and Georgia Tech. Meanwhile, a couple other Tier 2 conference programs are going to be getting playoff spots just because all of these teams went 10-2. That is a 6-way tie in total record for the conference records. They had different records anyway. UTEP, Southern Miss, Hawaii, all of them are being relegated. This is sad for the Miners, but they lost their head coach. Though I think the saddest thing of it all is Memphis, Tulsa, Tulane. All of them were so close to grasping at least a little bit of success in the SEC, and this is where they're at now. After all these years, schools like Wake Forest might actually be stuck in the Tier 3 conference, but for most schools, even like Vanderbilt, they got another chance to escape. Hawaii will be here next year, and Southern Miss will be back in the Sun Belt. There are schools like South Carolina, Boston College, though, that are just hidden deep down in these standings. We have still seen some parity across college football. Oregon is back. They're the #1 team in the country, despite Nebraska being the only undefeated team from this conference. And even West Virginia and Fresno State still can't muscle more than a 7-5 season. San Diego State is getting relegated with Maryland and Utah. Meanwhile, Oklahoma State, Boise State, and Iowa State all bounce back. This is kind of what they needed in these final few years to maybe have a championship push. Lots of 7-5 teams in this conference as well. Texas Tech just got relegated last year, and they're going to be stuck here. They were near the bottom, while Rutgers gets sent down alongside Purdue. That makes sense, even though they were a playoff team the year before, and Kennesaw State. Geographically, it won't be a great fit for Purdue in the Pac-12, but Kennesaw State has to go back to Conference USA, where UConn is 11-1, and we might as well put Rutgers in the MAC, see how they fare here. This is one of the last times that we're witnessing any promotion and relegation in this video, so it's a big deal for a school like Navy or North Texas to get up to at least the ACC and see if they can build off of any momentum there. I think that's the one we want to see. Just with being able to recruit better in the state of Texas through some pipelines, I would have predicted North Texas to do so much better than they did. But for that same reasoning, it kind of transitioned over to the California schools, San Diego State, Fresno State, that were able to surprise us a little bit. They've recruited some big players in California. Meanwhile, North Texas just couldn't win any battles out of Texas, really. Though they had a team that was capable of winning their conference and getting promotion. It also just hit me with that result. We haven't seen a single military school get promoted or relegated throughout this entire video. That is wild. UConn is going to get promotion over Western Kentucky, while Colorado State finally gets out of the MAC. Then you have Vanderbilt losing to UTSA. UTSA has gotten promotion a couple times in recent years. Oregon State is going to beat Kansas State, and finally FAU wins promotion again, this time over App State. Again, after this season, there is only one more year where we'll get to see the effect of teams getting either promoted or relegated. So not much time for much else to change in the college football world. Boise State is back in the playoff, though. Arkansas has also been able to make it here. North Texas has that final spot. We should have known, though, that Nebraska was taking home another Heisman Trophy. The receiver only had 14 receiving touchdowns. Demarius Cheeks, what a name. He has been fed the ball by the most accurate completion percentage quarterback in the country. Frederick Bostick is a lefty, though, and the leading passer is actually Dennis Madden on Boise State. Maybe the Broncos are going to be able to make a little bit of a playoff push. We'll find out in a second. Nicholas Turner, second leading rusher. Nigel Williams for West Virginia. I recognize that name. Did that kid play basketball? I feel like Gonzaga had a Nigel Williams back in like 2020 or something. leading receiver. Of course, he's winning the Heisman Trophy. Marshall with one of the guys up here. And by the time we make it to the national championship game, Nebraska and Penn State are here again. It is literally going to be a rematch. California was actually so close to beating the Cornhuskers as well. They lost by 2. Boise State shredded Arkansas, but then they also got shredded by Miami. And I just cannot believe that Nebraska is back in the national championship game again. They have become better than what Alabama was at one point. If they can win this one and then make it back to the national championship in the final couple seasons, Nick Saban's going to want to come out of retirement and try to retop them, because they've done this in a very short time frame. And it's not like many of their wins have come very easy either. They've all been coming down to the wire. Penn State trailing by 3. But the Nittany Lions are in control of their destiny. They are currently on fire with momentum. They've scored on their last 3 drives, and they've pulled off a comeback where Nebraska's struggling to tackle. I could very easily see this game headed to overtime. Looks like on a 3rd and 4, they're just going to throw it out of bounds. So Nebraska could get Penn State off the field here and win the national championship. Are they going to get pressure? Not fast enough, but he throws it into the back of his lineman's head. And that's the worst. He had somebody open too. Penn State only had 2 timeouts left, so Nebraska ran out the rest of the clock. Well, that's a three-peat. 4 in the last 5 years. Of the last 9 national championships, Nebraska has been to 7 of them. And if they can just win one more championship in these final 2 seasons, I'm saying that it's better than what happened at Alabama. That would be the same amount of national titles, and I also think in a little bit shorter of a time frame. Looking at some of these classes, even when Oklahoma State has these top classes, are they really making a run for it? I think I've moved past rooting for the underdog, thinking it's going to be possible, and now I'm just rooting for Nebraska to make college football history. They picked up Dominique Madden, a transfer receiver from Iowa, while also taking Iowa's best free safety, so they got 2 of the top 5 players in the portal. Headed into season 19, Nebraska is favored to win the entire thing. This is the final year for teams to either move up and down before we got our final list. And it is time for some final movements. Out of the SEC, what we're seeing is potentially 5 playoff teams from the conference. Auburn and LSU both 9-3, but looking like they're going to be in. Texas A&M is getting relegated, though, alongside California, who also is coming off of a playoff berth, and NC State. Recently, we've just seen teams struggle to stay there. Memphis is headed back, though, and Wyoming. Wyoming, of all teams, is not who I would have predicted, but they're going to be in the SEC for the final season, with Louisville, who is the tiebreaker over Tennessee and Arkansas. And now for the teams that are relegated down to a Tier 3 conference. For the final relegations, Tulane, Tulsa, Rice have all survived, but North Texas has not. Neither is Virginia Tech. They went on a run just a couple of seasons ago. UTSA's gone too. And I think they'll enjoy playing in the Mountain West Conference for the final season that Hawaii is trying to get out of. They're going to have a promotion game against Vanderbilt. I feel like we have seen this matchup 3 or 4 times. Meanwhile, North Texas will be headed back to the American, where Pittsburgh and SMU have both fallen in here. Kentucky, North Carolina going 5-7. I don't want to talk about it. UTEP also not finishing out very strong for a team that was successful at one point. In the Sun Belt, that's where we're going to be sticking. Virginia Tech, Georgia Southern, or App State is going to be getting out. This is a big rivalry for those teams. And finally, top of the other pyramid, Fresno State finishing at 5th place in this conference, but still 7-5. They are not going to get a playoff berth. Boise State 8-4. I think those teams have a lot to be proud of. They were competitive. They were able to stay up, but ultimately they're not going to win a championship. Oklahoma State immediately getting relegated alongside Iowa State and TCU. Are these the 3 that just came up to the Big Ten? That's what it feels like. San Diego State thought that they were going to get back up into it, but instead Washington, Maryland, and Cincinnati are going to take those 3 promotion spots. Unfortunate for the Aztecs, who were tied in conference play. And as we go farther down, we're sending Oregon State, Miami, Ohio, and Minnesota, who went 2-10 to the Tier 3 conferences. Due to Miami, Ohio headed back to the MAC conference, which is where teams typically fall the year after they promote. We just always send somebody back. I think we're just going to have to put Minnesota in Conference USA. It's going to allow the conference to cover more of the United States, while the Pac-12 gets Oregon State back. Utah State and Kansas State are going to be playing in this conference championship. And of all of these promotion games, I'm not sure I really care about any of them, since we're so close to the end, and I don't think these teams are going to win titles. We're still going to talk about who's getting promoted, though, and that's Kennesaw State winning this game against Western Kentucky. I feel like they lost that one quite a bit. Kansas State is also winning promotion, while Hawaii beats Vanderbilt. And then Toledo takes Central Michigan down by 6. App State waxes their rivals by 21. Pittsburgh beats SMU in a thriller with offense. They almost combined for 100 points. That is going to give us these final movements through promotion promotion and relegation. It's definitely given programs like Memphis a chance for them to elevate further than they would otherwise. I remember seeing the Big 12 rejected them from joining their conference this year in real life, and now they're going to be headed up to a Tier 1 conference in the final season. They're also in this playoff picture. I'm not sure how well they're going to do, though. Same with Nebraska. They are not a top 4 seed this year, so their pathway is not as easy. Connor Beck from Ball State is leading the country in passing yards and close to leading the country in interceptions. Those guys were slinging it all season. 27 rushing touchdowns for Pittsburgh running back Mike Lober. No wonder they were able to win promotion. Then you have the #1 transfer receiver in the country, Dominic Madden on Nebraska, having the most yards, but he didn't have as many touchdowns as Troy Traywin, who won the Heisman Trophy. Personally, I think the committee just got sick of handing it to Nebraska players. They felt like they had to change it up. I would have given it to the Nebraska receiver. There's just no way they're back in the national championship, and they did it, winning all of these games by multiple possessions. It's against Georgia, who could still tie them in this video for the most national championships. What Kirby Smart would have to do, though, is not only win this game, but also win the next one. And Frederick Bostick is still the quarterback for Nebraska. They've had a lot of consistency at that position. I can't say it's looking great for the Bulldogs, since they're going for an onside kick with a few minutes left. By the time they were able to get the ball back, they might not even get off one final snap. Nebraska put up another 3 points. It was a 3-possession game. There was no way that Nebraska was losing. Here's another national championship for them. Maybe I just don't make it deep enough into my dynasty files to see Nebraska go on runs like this. I have never witnessed them be this dominant. That is 4 straight national championships, and they're not losing their head coach either. While Lincoln Riley was fired at USC, he's headed to California. He's staying in the state of California. But I won't forget when he was winning them national championships. If we just search by career winning percentage, there are going to be some that are higher than Mike Bobo, but his record has just been incredible. Specifically, his record at Nebraska, it is 176-33. However, I think when Nick Saban was at Alabama, he won like 200 games and only lost 30. So his tenure with the Crimson Tide was still better than what is currently going on at Nebraska. They just signed the 14th best class. This is a letdown. I say that like they're not all 4-stars though, and a lot of these guys are transfers. Steve Kiernan is going to have a lot of pressure on him if he wins the starting quarterback job to get them their 5th straight natty. Everything that we have built up to in this experiment comes down to this one final season, and there were things I was expecting to happen that never did, but realistically, I should have probably known it wasn't going to. And once we get to the end of the season, we'll take a closer look at how every conference turned out. Here in the American, clearly the committee likes East Carolina because they're the #8 team in the country with 2 losses. This is a Tier 3 conference. Kentucky is still not going to even be in the conference championship. And I'm not sure if 4-8 Virginia is a quality loss or what, but that's one of their losses. SMU is another, and they're the #8 team. I can't explain it. Looking at the rest of the American, to see UTEP fall here at the very end is kind of sad because they had a run at one point that was impressive. North Texas, again, I've said I thought they were going to do better. Even USF I thought would do better. But now we're on to the Big 12, a Tier 2 conference where Oklahoma State went up and down so many times. We saw Utah do the same thing. Kansas State was actually buried in a Tier 3 conference for a while. And I'm not surprised by most of the teams here. San Diego State had a little bit of a run in the Big 10 themselves. Then Indiana, after Kurt Cignetti left them, well, they've just fallen off of a cliff. UConn had moments. Texas Tech would have been relegated if there was another year. Seeing them fall off has been really surprising. Oregon's back though. Penn State, I'm pretty sure they got relegated at one point, but they've also been able to bounce back. Nebraska's still a top 6 team. Boise State was able to make the jump and stay in this Tier 1 conference for a good bit, but not the entire time. There were moments where they got relegated. Fresno State finally had a bad season. It'd been like 6 or 7 years. Then in Conference USA, none of these teams really seemed to stick in the second tier once they got promoted. They always would get relegated. Kansas has bounced around in a couple Tier 3 conferences. Minnesota falling this far is pretty bad, but that's just the way it is sometimes. UMass, I remember being surprised that they even got promoted at one point. They had Kenny Dillingham. Rutgers, though, has fallen down here. We saw Purdue in the MAC. We saw Northwestern in the MAC for moments. Most of those teams, though, similar to like being in the Mountain West, they just weren't ever able to stick in any of the conferences once they got promoted. Vanderbilt has been here multiple times. Wake Forest, this could have finally been their year. Poor guys. Purdue and Michigan State in the Pac-12 Conference Championship. Northwestern, this is where they have ended up now. I've just lost track of some of these teams like BYU. Then we have the SEC, the other Tier 1 conference. We saw Alabama get relegated at one point. Well, now they're back on top of the conference. Notre Dame got relegated. Texas got relegated. Memphis has kind of made a name for themselves in just sticking here. Either that or they've done pretty well in the ACC. For all of these next teams, they have definitely been relegated at one point. Wyoming did not find much success in their first season in this conference. Louisville, I'm just impressed they bounced back from Tier 3. That is going to leave us with the Sun Belt. I feel like this has been a good recap. South Carolina was stuck here for such a long time. Virginia Tech, they had that moment that we talked about a bit where they went off, but now they're back down here. Boston College has also been down in the Sun Belt for as long as I can remember. James Madison, though, this was the first Sun Belt champion at the very end of this 20-year experiment. They're finishing at the bottom. Then we have our final conference championship games. Teams that would have been promoted if there were more seasons, you're able to see right here. Also, playoff spots on the line that were decided. Like Utah just guaranteed that they're going to be in the college football playoff. SMU, I think they're taking that spot away from Oklahoma State just because they're conference champion. They're both ranked 12. Little confused off of that. This is what that playoff bracket is looking like, though. East Carolina is an underdog in here that we can root for. Nebraska, of course, they won a conference championship, so they have a first-round bye. And they beat Penn State in the Big Ten one. Josh Cloud, the Florida quarterback, wins the Heisman Trophy. It is not another Nebraska player, and I think what I've decided as I've been looking at these stats is I wish there was a way to bookmark players so I could then look for them in the transfer portal a little bit easier or follow them throughout their careers if they do transfer. That would have just made tracking some of these guys a little bit easier. George Rich, the leading rusher at Kent State, he also led the country in rushing touchdowns, though it was like a 5-way tie. And then on the receiving side of things, 26 receiving touchdowns for Cole Lewis out of Texas. I don't even think Texas was in the playoff. He still had an incredible season, though. For the national championship game, you literally cannot make this up. We have seen this game multiple times already. Nebraska is like unbeatable. I truly don't understand how they've continued to do this season after season. Maybe their conference schedule is a little bit lighter and that helps. They lost to Iowa by 2 points, but that's the only loss that they've picked up. They just survived against USC, and they could literally finish off this video with 5 straight national championships, 6 of the last 7. Kirby Smart, please prevent this from happening. At first, it was awesome to see them back, but now they literally just run college football every season. And it made me realize that same type of thing happens a lot in the soccer world where they have promotion and relegation. So is it the best thing for the sport to have promotion and relegation? I wasn't sure what answer I would come to, what conclusion I'd have by the end of this video, but as you can see, it's another national championship for Nebraska. I think it finished 37-17. There was nothing to watch. And yeah, there it is, 37-17, the final score. For all we know, Nebraska will just continue to run the sport forever into the future. And they really did it. They won 7 national championships in 10 years, 5 of them in a row. It's just a great run from them, really. We had this pattern going on here, and then Nebraska said, we're just going to win the rest of them. If we look back on history, though, plenty of great seasons. I do think it's kind of funny that Oregon never got their national championship either. They went 0 for 4 like the Buffalo Bills. And that is going to do it for this video. If you made it this far, let me know what you think about promotion and relegation ever being in college football. It will never happen, but I'm curious to hear how you think it could be implemented, if you think I did a decent job with it. And if you also made it this far, show some support, like the video, check out some more other content. Love you guys. See you all in the next one.